The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization formed to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. The statements and opinions of the candidates are presented solely in the interest of public service and in no way are to be construed as an endorsement thereof by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters takes no responsibility for any of the views or facts stated by the candidates.
The League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. We're in Rochester Hills, and we're here to discuss Rochester Hills City Council positions. I'm delighted to moderate this, as I have in the past. Following this segment, we will host candidates vying for the position of mayor as well. The general election does take place on Tuesday, November 3rd. A little bit about myself. I'm a 27-year resident of the city of Rochester, regional manager at DT Energy, and a member of the League of Women Voters Oakland area. If you don't know about the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that works to inform you and encourage your participation in government. We work to increase the understanding of major public policy issues and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters hosts forums just like this one so that you will be well informed and able to cast a responsible vote, in this case, on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. A voter guide is created by the League of Women Voters and will be available at the end of September on our website. The website is lwvoa.org. That's lwvoa.org. At this time, I would like to remind the audience to please shut off any cell phones or electronic devices. So the city of Rochester Hills is divided into 4 districts for city council positions. Tonight, we're talking to candidates who are vying for 2 of those positions. One is an at-large position that's across all city boundaries. The second is for the City Council District 3. Again, this will be for the general election November 3rd. All Rochester Hills city residents will vote in the at-large race. We have 3 candidates who are running for 2 at-large city council seats, so you can vote for no more than 2 in that election. Also, residents in District 3, which covers essentially the center-south end of the city. That's the approximate boundaries are Avon to South Boulevard, Rochester to Crook, so that's kind of District 3. You'll get to vote for your district council person. And for this district, we have 2 candidates vying for 1 position. All the members of the City of Rochester City Council, the City of Rochester Hills City Council, serve a 4-year term and receive an annual salary of $6,577. They are term limited for 2 4-year terms. They do have the authority to adopt ordinances and resolutions, among other duties. The candidates tonight have drawn for the order of speaking and will introduce themselves with a brief 1-minute opening statement. Following the opening statements from the candidates, they will respond to questions from the audience. Questions will be or can be directed to one or all of the candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to every question, and rebuttals are allowed. Candidates have been asked to limit their answers to about 2 minutes. I will remind our candidates that responses may only address issues pertaining to the position of City Council. We will not tolerate things like personal attacks. We ask the audience to please not hold your applause and any comments until the end of the program. So now we'd like to begin with the opening statements. Our first at-large candidate, and we'll do the 3 at-large candidates first and then the 2 District 3 candidates. So our first at-large candidate is Bill Soul. Mr. Soul.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. It's really important for our voters to be educated on the issues and on the candidates that they have to choose from. And I'd like to thank the residents who are here who are watching on TV, watching online for this time. My name is Bill Soul, and I am a professor of Media and Communication Arts and Business Law at Macomb Community College. I've lived in the city for 6 years. I live on Fieldstone Drive. I'm married with 3 children. We have a just turned 15-year-old this weekend, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So I'm pretty busy. And we're doing fall T-ball, so I'm coaching the fall T-ball team through RARA. I'm a graduate of the Michigan State University College of Law. When I started there, it was called the Detroit College of Law, and is now the right field bleachers of Comerica Park. I'm also a graduate of Oakland University, and I grew up in Sterling Heights. My father was a police officer. My mother was a stay-at-home mom.
Thank you, Mr. Soul.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Next, for our second candidate for at-large is Mark Tisdall. Mr. Tisdall.
Thank you. Thank you, League of Women Voters. Thank you, Ms. Gribbs, for facilitating, and the League for sponsoring this event. My name is Mark Tisdall. I'm seeking re-election to a council at-large seat in the Rochester Hills City Council. I currently serve as the Council Vice President. I'm on the OPC Governing Board and their Finance Committee. I've served, I'm in my 4th year now as serving as the liaison for the Rochester Hills Government Youth Council, served on the City Clerk Selection Committee, and I think we did a great job. Serve on multiple other committees as well. Rochester Hills' success starts with its exceptional population. 60% of our adults have an associate's degree or higher. A third of those are graduate degrees or professional degrees. Again, just look at the credentials of the people on this panel. And I'm not running to improve or enlighten our population. I'm running to continue the efficient delivery of excellent services and to build upon the past good governance of this council and past councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third at-large candidate is Dale Hetrick. Mr. Hetrick.
Thank you, Ms. Gribbs. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for investing your time to attend tonight's candidate forum. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for producing the event. I'm Dale Hetrick, currently an at-large City Council member. I've been part of Rochester Hills' success story for more than 7 years. I've approved numerous commercial and residential developments which improve the workability and livability of our city. I've created more than $3 million in dedicated funding for local road maintenance without raising taxes. I've led ballot initiatives to fully fund police services for 10 years and add additional firefighter EMS personnel. Proven experience, proven leadership, exceptional results. Those qualities define my candidacy to continue as your Rochester Hills at-large City Councilman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from 2 District 3 candidates. First up is Susan Boyer. Ms. Boyer.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you to Ms. Griffiths for hosting this and doing a good job tonight. I'm Dr. Susan Boyer. I have lived in Rochester Hills over 15 years. I first moved here in the early 80s when it was Avon Township, and then I moved back after I had my child, and I lived, so far I've lived in 3 different locations in the city, and I really love this city. I have been the president of my subdivision, which was the largest one in Rochester Hills, Cumberland Hills subdivision, the largest one in Rochester Hills, for over 7 years. So I have a lot of experience running a small subdivision. We had to be fiscally responsible with the budgets that we had, so I can bring that to the table. I have an extensive education. I graduated from Oakland University with a PhD in physics. I work at Henry Ford. I've been there for 20 years. I bring my research scientist skills to understanding everything that comes before City Council. We'll look at the questions that are proposed and the objects and things that people want to change and make sure that they're going to be good decisions for this city. We'll make sure that the decisions we make now are good for us now and good for us in the future. And I look forward to enjoying some time here on City Council, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Julie Grantham. Julie Grantham.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight, and I want to congratulate you on your 95th anniversary too, providing information to voters. in the United States. I did grow up here in Rochester Hills, so I have a more unique perspective compared to the other candidates and actual council members. You know, the farms are gone from my childhood, but one of the early challenges Rochester Hills faced initially was the development. But now, you know, how do we still provide the services that our residents want and need when we don't have new development bringing in extra tax revenue? You know, so our challenge certainly is going to be how do we deal with redevelopment of areas? Often firms prefer, you know, undeveloped land as opposed to already built on land. So how do we deal with the redevelopment in Rochester Hills as we become a more mature economy? I've had decades experience on, you know, commissions, nonprofit boards. I've had a career that has gone from law to business to academia, degrees as well. And so I'm hoping that this skill set will be unique to the council and very beneficial. And I recently retired, right, so I do have time to devote to the city. Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Grantham. So now the fun part, we get to ask them questions. So who's got questions? I guess I'll start here and I'll end up over there and I'll zigzag. You get my attention. I'll try and keep pace with all the questions that we have. I know we'll try and get to all of them if at all possible. I would ask that you get right to your question directly, and that you identify first off who the question is for, if it's for one or two or a specific number of candidates or all the candidates. So here we go. Come on over here. All right. And your question is for who?
Happy to be close to you.
There you go. Thanks. Oh, thanks. Who's your question for?
The non-incumbent candidates. The major topic at the last two meetings of the council were the budget for 2016. Only the incumbent members of council seeking re-election and Mayor Barnett were in attendance. The rest of you candidates apparently had absolutely nothing to say on how the administration proposed to spend the city's money next year. No criticisms, no suggestions, no agreements, nothing. I know that you were not in attendance at the budget meetings because at the first meeting there was only one resident there, and at the second meeting again only one resident who spoke.
So I've got the mic here. Would you please ask your question?
To each of you, did you ever even read and go through the proposed budget and technical appendices? And if you have read them, why didn't you add anything to the discussion?
So why don't we just go right to left, and we'll start with Ms. Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. Zendel, and thank you also for always coming to meetings and sharing your knowledge over all these years. It's very beneficial, I'm sure, to the council members.
Would you do me a
have the
favor
budget.
and talk a little closer?
sorry,
Or pull your
sorry.
mic closer? Actually, slide it forward.
Like that.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Zendel, I do have the budget and I have the appendices. I did read the 2000, I read the prior one more in detail than I read this one. I didn't have as much time given my schedule. I've got a new prep this semester done. But in general, I find that the budget is very well done. There's history, we have goals, we have objectives for the future. There's a glossary at the end for words that perhaps people don't realize or what the governmental definition of a word would be. So in general, I feel that the budget is very good and very explanatory. And if you don't have a physical copy of it, you can also go online and look at the budget.
Thank you. I would just remind folks that you're not supposed to have any visual, aids.
Oh, sorry.
Kind of thing. So, Ms. Bauer.
Yes, and I didn't.
Dr. Bauer, I'm sorry.
I wasn't able to come to the meeting, but I did watch it online, and I have gone over the budgets in the past, and I have looked at them, and I do agree with Ms. Grantham that they do a good job of taking into account. I think Ms. Hill requesting the extra, was it lime for the roads up by where she is, was something that the city had overlooked, and they having going to be including it in their budget. So I thought that they did a good job with that. So I am watching an oversight on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I don't know if you consider Mr. Hetrick being on the council. Yes, you do, even though he's only been on it for, what, a year, say? Mr. Soul.
Okay, I too have looked at the budget, and I watched the meetings online, And, the only thing I have to say about the budget is I appreciate the sort of the 3-year forecast that we've been working with. I don't know if 3 years is the perfect number or longer. The most recent budget, again, I agree that, we do a good job with our budget here. The only questions I would have is some efficiencies, where cost cutting can be done. And the problem I usually have is that everybody on council seems to get along maybe a little bit too well at times. And so even with residents in attendance, some of their questions I think are just overlooked as perhaps unimportant to what council and what the mayor's office is attempting to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Soul. Mr. Hetrick has a rebuttal.
Well, perhaps not necessarily a rebuttal, just some commentary, perhaps related to the idea that we get along too well. I'll make one point around that. Folks might recognize that I proposed adding an additional police officer or deputy in the 2016 budget. Unfortunately, that was not agreed to, which would be a great example of how we don't always agree on everything. The second thing I'd point out is the 3-year rolling budget is one that very few cities have adopted, and we do a phenomenal job of putting that together. In fact, one of the things on our goals is to begin to develop a 7-year rolling forecast for our planning purposes, which, by the way, give us an even better view of how we can deal with things in the future. That's it. Thank you.
And our next question is for
all of them. Mark Twain famously said, "There are lies, damn lies, and statistics." Are you, while on council, going to check out so-called data and facts, or are you just going to accept the presentations from administration, whether they are awards, zoning laws, business cases, or budgets?
Why don't we start with Mr. Tisdale?
Thank you, Ms. McGoldrick. I think that all of us on council hopefully spend quite a bit of time reviewing the information, working closely with the department directors, many of whom have 20 years or more experience in their particular fields of expertise. And ultimately, you have to remember that this is a part-time job for most of us, and we do rely upon the department directors. There are a lot of questions, a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings that occur, bringing all of us up to speed when these subjects come across our desk, because you have to remember, we get to delve into a little bit of everything that the city does. And so we do rely heavily upon the department directors, the field managers, and the personnel that are out there. And if something does catch our attention, and we're very fortunate, we have some excellent representatives on our current council. I think very educated and highly analytical people, and I think that there's not an awful lot that gets by us. Thank you.
We'll go to Bill Soul.
Thank you. Of course, one of my pledges, and if you've looked at my website or anything like that, you'll know that I've promised to do my due diligence. And I think there's been instances where council maybe has not had the opportunity to do its due diligence, or relied maybe too much on the opinions of one or the other. Understanding, as Mr. Tisdale pointed out, council does deal with a lot of facts and figures, and it is a part-time job for everybody who's on council. But it's an important part-time job to do that research, and not just accept, the gratification of the accolades, I think is one of the things that you asked about. The accolades that the city's received recently have been amazing, but I find it interesting that I feel that they're all the residents' accolades. Very little of it is what the city has done for the residents, is what the residents do for the city every time. And I think that's overlooked sometimes.
Dale Hattrick?
I'm sorry, me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. A couple things that I would point out. First of all, department directors like Alan Schnecht and Keith Sodden are incredibly talented people. In fact, while you might think of these as, pardon me, damn lies or statistics, they've received significant awards. Our AAA bond rating isn't because we get lucky. It's because Keith Sodden and his team do an incredible job with our finances. Our awards for things having to do with our Department of Public Services have little to do with being lucky. It's because Alan Schnecht does a great job of putting things together for those organizations. And as such, we expect that what they do is worthy of consideration. Let me give you a few examples. With regard to public safety, I mentioned that I'd put together a proposal to fully fund police services for 10 years. That started with a citizen-driven committee known as Public Safety and Infrastructure Technical Review Committee. We did weeks, months worth of due diligence to understand what we needed to do to fully fund the police. But that also required help from Mr. Sodden and his organization to help us understand the finances and how we could actually build, I'll call it a business case or a ballot proposal that was worthy of our residents' consideration. And when we did that, the checks and balances, if you will, that occurs, we brought that recommendation to City Council. They asked us a number of questions before we actually got the ballot proposal done. Once that ballot proposal was agreed upon, then it was out for vote of the people, which, by the way, was overwhelmingly supported by residents of our city. So I think what that points out is a number of things. Number one, we do our duty as City Council to put forth ordinances or proposals that are relevant to the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. But number two, we listen to them because things like police services were a very high priority in a recent resident survey.
Please bring
Thank
your
you.
answer to a question.
I'm finished now.
Thank you very much. Okay. Dr. Bauer?
Thank you for that question, Ms. McGoldrick, and I'm nobody's rubber stamp. So I will definitely do due diligence on determining if we have the expertise in our city to answer a question. The gas and oil leases come to mind. Maybe we should have had a lawyer that was understanding of gas and oil leases look at that before we ever sign that. Did anybody on City Council have anything ever to do with gas and oil before that was rushed through our City Council? No, I will definitely be going over things before I ever put my decision forth on anything that comes before City Council. Thank you.
Julie Grantham?
Based on my educational background, I've had quite a few classes in statistics and forecasting and econometrics. And so I probably would perhaps look more carefully than some folks who haven't had quite that background at the parameters of the study. If I had any questions, I'm sure that the department members would be happy to answer them for me. But of course, we do know that statistics can be interpreted differently. And so certainly, I'm familiar with that from my background, and I certainly would probably look further if I had some questions.
Thank you very much. And your question is for?
It's for all the candidates. Our city has recently passed ordinances regarding gas and oil drilling. So my question is, are you satisfied with the ordinance that we have in place now? And if you are, why? And if you're not, what would you change?
So why don't we start back with the District 3 candidates? Julie Grantham.
Well, unfortunately, I came in kind of at the tail end of the Planning Commission and the oil and gas leases, but I was there, in fact, when we made our recommendation to City Council. And the residents should rest assured that fracking, in fact, is banned in the ordinance. We also have a 1,000-foot setback from residential areas, guys. So if there would, in fact, be any type of drilling in Rochester Hills, it's limited to a small corridor on M59. So I know some folks are concerned about the Oakland University area, but we have to remember that's state land. It's not under Rochester Hills jurisdiction. So I think that the ordinance that we have now is very good in terms of protecting us. But also remember, we can't outright ban it because then it's likely people with their private property rights would sue the city of Rochester Hills. And that, of course, would probably cost us a great deal of money because lawyers aren't cheap.
Susan Boyer?
On one hand, I'm really pleased that we have an ordinance.
Excuse me, would you mind pulling your microphone closer?
On one hand, I'm really pleased that we have an ordinance that will help ban the oil drilling and fracking from our city. On the other hand, I'm not pleased that it came from the north of the town right down into my town. It's going to be on the Hamlin corridor, anywhere from Livernois to Adams. That is all the industrial areas in our city where oil wells can go in. I'm sure when the oil company lawyers see that we've moved their lease from the north of town where their oil was discovered to this side of town, that their lawyers will probably be coming at us full force. And I'm not sure that our city has any sort of money to deal with the kind of money that the oil and gas companies have for trying to get what they want for the leases that we sign. So I am pretty worried about what's going to happen with that.
Dale Hetrick?
Thank you. The oil and gas ordinance, in my view, is very good. In fact, it is more stringent than the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality in terms of requirements and procedures. Ms. Grantham gave a few of those. 1, 1,000-foot setback. 2, industrial zones. So realistically, even if it's somewhere near where any of us may live, we're still 1,000 feet away from a home, a church, a building of any sort. There's groundwater monitoring monthly. That assures that the safety of our groundwater is monitored on a regular basis. Also, truck traffic must be approved by the traffic engineer. So any activity that moves material from that site to some other location must go on a road that is described or prescribed by the city of Rochester Hills. As was mentioned, hydraulic fracturing is prohibited. The other thing that was mentioned was we would be somehow drilling in the wrong places, and the really good news to that is there's a concept known as horizontal drilling that allows for these well sites to be in places where they can be far away from our residential locations, maintain the health, safety, and welfare of our individuals, get to the material that they're looking for a mile under the earth without disrupting what we consider to be our above-ground private property. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Soul.
Thank you. You know, the oil and gas lease, I guess, or the ordinances were an inevitable result of the lease. And, you know, we can say we're satisfied with it because of the limitations put on the drilling. However, what we can't control is the drilling that occurs outside of our city limits, and then with the horizontal drilling techniques that they use where they can drill for up to 2 miles. You know, recently on the Don't Drill the Hills website, they indicated that one of the churches located at Silver Bell and Adams leased their property for drilling. Well, if you have a 2-mile capability, that takes you right under Van Hoosen Middle School, Adams High School, and even the Tinkin Road Park, that's city property, as well as possibly under Nowicki Park. So our ordinance, as far as drilling is concerned, may be meaningless because of the horizontal drilling capability, and there's nothing to prevent the company that we have the agreement with to assign their rights to the company that Oakland Township or Auburn Hills or Shelby Township or anybody else may have an agreement with. And so that's where my concern is that what rights are assignable, and are these other companies going to abide by the agreements that we've already had in place?
Thank you. Mark Tisdall.
Thank you. First, drilling is not banned in Rochester Hills. cities that have attempted to ban drilling, and once oil and or natural gas have been found, have paid a very high price for that kind of prohibition. The drilling is restricted into industrial areas only, and again, as has been pointed out, with a 1,000-foot setback from residences, schools, places of worship, those kinds of occupied buildings. There has been no oil or gas found in the Rochester Hills area in several decades. There was a lease signed by the city in 2005 that passed unanimously, and that exploration proved to be zero. There was a well drilled in Orion Township that came up dry, so we're not anticipating any additional exploration or drilling in this area for some time. And last but not least, I think probably one of the biggest pieces of confusion in this whole oil and gas lease that the city signed is that relative to parks and the cemetery, the lease did not open up a single inch of Tinkin Park, Nowicki Park, or the cemetery. In fact, drilling, even entry into those pieces of land, was barred by Exhibit A, an addendum to that lease. So the lease protects the city. It bans drilling in the lands covered by the lease. All it did was ensure that if oil was found, we got an above-market share royalty, and that royalty came immediately versus having to wait after penalties if we got caught up in a compulsory lease. Thank you.
And your question is for? I'm sorry?
Can I rebut that for
Yes,
a
you
second,
can.
please? One of the things about the drilling ordinance that is of concern, and I think it was even expressed when, by President Hooper at the meeting, that the ordinance may be so restrictive that we could still end up getting sued the city could still end up getting sued by the oil and gas company for making the ordinance too restrictive, and blocking the whole purpose of the contract.
Mr. Tisdale.
And those are valid points, but the question is not can the city be sued. I think the question is more can the city be successfully sued. And the opportunity to put together this ordinance came out of appellate court law in July of 2014. It hinges on the abilities of horizontal drilling, so we can't ban that. It is restrictive. The probabilities that it will ever be challenged, in our best guesstimate, are low, and so that's why we went forward.
Dale Hetner.
Yes, thank you. I would simply add that our city attorney, who, by the way, is a very well-respected city attorney, reviewed the ordinance and was very clear that it was defensible in court. He could defend it, and with that, I was comfortable with the fact that our ordinance was good, reasonable, defendable, and something that we could put in place. Thank you.
And your question is for?
My question is for all of them. Going forward, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing City Council and or the city, and how are you uniquely qualified to handle that challenge? Thank you.
Why don't we start with our District 3 candidates, Dr. Susan Boyer.
Thank you. Going forward, I see, yes, we will always have issues with coming up with funds for making sure that our roads are going to be good, because we live in a climate where we have the continual freezing and thawing, and so our roads are always going to need repairing. Coming up with making sure that we have enough funds for our police and our fire department, making sure that those funds are there and that we have enough without increasing taxes. The elderly population, as they're getting older, they're on a fixed income, so they're not going to be able to deal well with continuing increases in taxes. So having to come up with a way to make sure that their income and their cost of living in our city kind of is maintained is something that we have to go forward in the future with. And that's one of the more important things, I think, in the city. And I think having been on my own Rochester Hills subdivision and looking at the cost of what we have everybody paying per year, making sure that we don't increase that too much, making sure that we're covering all the costs that we have, and being extremely fiscally responsible. And I think I definitely can bring that to the table.
Thank you. Julie Grantham.
Thank you. Certainly, we face challenges now that we're a more mature community as opposed to a growing community of the early years of Rochester Hills. We could rely upon new development to bring in tax revenue to the city. And then also, since we were expanding, tax revenues would increase with the increase in house prices. Okay? And then, of course, the recession came in December of 2007 and 2009. And so, we had to learn to live with less. And, tough budget decisions had to be made. Personnel were let go or not replaced. And so our challenge now, since we, in fact, are more mature of an economy, is how do we provide the, police protection? How do we provide the fire protection? How do we provide all the services that we in Rochester Hills rely upon without increasing our tax base or increasing our millage rates? Because, of course, folks really don't want that. But then as a more mature community and a more affluent community as opposed to Pontiac or Auburn Hills, for example, we do put great value on our parks. We put value on having green space. And so our challenge is to find out from the residents what exactly are we really willing to pay for, and what in fact would be something that's nice to have that way. And so do we pursue perhaps more private routes for items that are kind of nice to have and not a basic necessity? So I really feel that funding is going to be the major issue in the future, because funding will determine what's available for roads and what's available for police and I think it all boils down to funding. And so we're going to have to look at how we handle funding in a more mature community, given what individuals are willing to pay for in terms of, basic services such as police and fire protection, and then also what are we willing to have because we're a more mature community and also a more affluent community, and would there be any opportunities for private funding?
Thank you. Mr. Tisdale.
Thank you. I think two of the challenges that come to mind for me is that 2017, 2018, our drain fund, our surface water management fund goes to zero. It's very difficult to come up with a way to create some kind of user fee or tax that meets the state requirements for a user fee, for example, to rebuild that fund. So that's one of the really near-term concerns. Secondly, between the 83 million, millennials and 78 million retiring or aging baby boomers, housing choices, housing demand, housing tastes are changing. We are a city of excellent and very desirable subdivisions, but millennials and baby boomers increasingly are looking for the same kind of housing, something with a more urban, walkable appeal, yet they still like the safety, the services, and the schools of a suburb. So retrofitting some of our suburban areas, utilizing the land use, master land use changes that have instituted or allowed for form-based versus use-based zoning, a kind of a flexible use of, or mixed use of residential, retail, and commercial, where you can work, shop, and live all in the same neighborhood. Retrofitting some of our areas is going to be a big challenge. We'd have to retain baby boomers, aging baby boomers. If any community is dependent upon its professional class, if we can't rely upon the services demand of physicians, dentists, trust attorneys, financial planners that the 18 to 45-year-old group uses. Our senior citizens keep those people in business. And millennials, we want to get them now so that when they are married and have children, they stay right in our community instead of moving someplace else. Thank you.
Bill Soul.
I would tend to agree with Mr. Tisdale to an extent where, with our aging population, we need to do something to keep that population base within our city. A lot of that hinges on the services provided by the OPC. But I also agree that we need to make our neighborhoods kind of more walkable or kind of self-contained. A lot of the neighborhoods in Rochester Hills have their own parks within the neighborhood, and that's great. My neighborhood does not. So for our neighborhood, we almost have to get in a car to go somewhere or go to the school. And the school has a great playground, but as a city government, we owe it to our residents as well to provide similar recreation opportunities. One of the things that I'm seeing right now in our city is we're not providing those walkable neighborhoods. I see strip malls and fast food restaurants, and we're cramming in tiny condo properties wherever we can. And so, I think that's something else that has to be addressed. The roads and infrastructure are very difficult because the intergovernmental activity that has to happen, the communication that has to happen. If we don't get funding from the state like we're supposed to, or we don't get cooperation from the county like we would like, we're going to always have problems with the roads. And again, implementing a special tax or something like that doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
Thank you. Dale Hedrick, you haven't answered that question yet, have you?
I have not.
Do you remember the question?
I understand the question to be, what are the challenges and what are my qualifications to deal with those challenges? And so I understand the challenges to be, in essence, three things. One, public safety. Two, our roads and infrastructure. And three, the funding mechanisms for the operation of the city. Let's talk a little bit about the first one, public safety. My qualifications to deal with public safety, I already mentioned. I put together ballot proposals to fully fund the police for 10 years. I put together ballot proposals to add additional firefighter and EMS. Both of those ballot proposals were overwhelmingly supported by residents. So I think that's pretty clear that I understand what needs to be done to deal with public safety. And I have some personal reasons for that too that I won't get into because then it'll take me way too long to finish the conversation here. Number two, roads and infrastructure and or places to live. Being part of the Planning Commission, I've dealt with the capital improvement plans for our roads. I also approved bringing additional money in to build Tinkin from Livernois to Adams ahead of Road Commission of Oakland County funding, which we will ultimately be paid back. Another interesting activity, or I'll call it activity, is Barrington Park. When I was on Planning Commission, we approved that. I also approved that as part of the City Council. And what does that provide? It provides a great portfolio of housing that people want. It's walkable. They're townhouse-style homes that either millennials or folks who are of the baby boomer generation, yes, Mr. Tisdall's age, would be interested in. So all of those things, I've actually done the work to support what we need to do to deal with the challenges going forward in Rochester Hills. Thank you.
So why don't we dig into that just a little bit further? I have a question from one of your constituents. What significant improvements or developments would you like to see take place in the city over the next 2 years? Please be specific. We'll start with Bill Soul.
I would like to see a little bit more control over some of the developments that are already happening. In certain parts of our city, the traffic is so bad, especially down, Rochester Road, Auburn area. It's troubling, and it's dangerous. And we're squeezing in new condo establishments where they were never planned to be there. And that's very frustrating for the residents. And, we're squeezing in strip malls. It's very frustrating. It's dangerous to be there. And so I would like to see us, as a city government, I should say, take a closer look at overdevelopment in some areas. You know, we're losing our residential character in certain ways because of areas like that corner of Rochester and Auburn.
So again, I'm going to ask the question, what significant improvements or economic development would you like to see in the next 2 years? Mr. Tisdall.
The two areas that, for economic development, that I would like to see some real creativity applied to would be the four corners of, or the continuation of development of the four corners of Tinkin and Rochester Road. I think the City Walk people have done an excellent job of creating probably, or what will be, the most walkable area in the city. I'd love to see something creative go on at that twist drill site and then kitty corner over at where the Hollywood Market is. Additionally, there are perhaps 65 acres or so contiguous along Rochester Road and then bending east on Hamlin that are going to be developed within the next couple of years. And again, that could be very creatively developed for mixed use. And actually mixed use can, if properly done, reduce congestion because it takes people out of their cars. Again, creating areas where you can live, work, and shop all in the same neighborhood.
Thank you. Dale Hedrick.
Thanks for the question. And it's really economic development? That's the focus of this question? I thought it was a little broader.
I think it's significant improvements and
Okay,
development.
good.
So, you know,
because
one could interpret that either way.
Yes. From an economic development standpoint, I'd actually like to see more emphasis put on what we can do with the landfill sites. Those are opportunities that we've tried for years through various methods to get some commercial development there, and those are sites that are very useful. There's actually one off of Hamlin that, if we can get that moving, would be a significant improvement in our commercial property. But I'd switch gears, and I'd say the one development that I think is going to be phenomenal as it unfolds is Riverbend Park. One of the really unique features of Riverbend Park is that's being developed with private funds. The public-private partnership that's developed to put that project together is a very significant thing. And in my view, that concept is one that we could potentially use for other types of, I'll call it park or recreation development within the city of Rochester Hills. Not just economic development or commercial development, because one of the interesting things is in our commercial development, we have a very low vacancy rate. So people want to build stuff here. And that's a good thing. But let's take advantage of some of the places that we have that are somewhat unique. And I also think Riverbend Park is just a phenomenal idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Boyer.
I agree with many of the things that the other council members have said. I think that ideally some of the buildings that have stood empty for so long, like the Kmart's building now, if that could get taken over and something put in there. I live close to the Little Time Market that just opened. It was in the old Papa Joe's that had sat empty for many years. It had a little fire and everything. So to get places like that built up would be better than leaving them to stay empty. I would like to see more of the green spaces bought up in our city because I think we are overdeveloping our city. I think it is getting very congested. You used to be able to take 10 minutes to go from one side of town to the other. Now you have to allow at least 30 to 40 minutes because there's so much traffic. The Rochester Road, I know there's been quite a few studies to see if we could put some more lights on there because there's so many accidents that happen on that road. Anything that could go in there, but it'll never happen because the state of Michigan said no. But those are some of the areas that need work.
Julie Grantham.
Well, the first thing that popped into my head was that we need to do something about where the old Winchester Theater was. So I guess that's where, of course, Kmart would be too, but it seems like that has been, quite empty for quite some time. I also thought of Riverbend Park and how exciting that's going to be. I don't know if anybody went to the meetings about it, but all of the brainstorming that's been done to try to figure out what we want there. But the other thing, and this you'll forgive me because of my service on the Historic District Commission, but I would be interested in having more areas designated as historic districts, because I think we are losing a lot of our heritage, and I find it very sad. So I would like to explore more historic districts.
Thank you. Your question is for?
My question's for all of them. Thank you very much for all trying to run for city council seats. I appreciate all of your continuing dedication to Rochester Hills. Mark, thank you very much for bringing up that it rains. When it rains in our town, the water has to go somewhere. And thank goodness in our town, the water doesn't go in the same place when you flush your toilet, where that goes. So that's a good, less expensive thing to begin with. But when it does rain, we have spent millions building retention facilities for some of our residents in Rochester Hills with drain funds. The city of Rochester Hills maintains those retention ponds and those retention facilities. In other parts of Rochester Hills, we have organized subdivisions, like where I live, where I have to pay 100% to maintain my retention pond and 100% to maintain my stormwater drain facilities that are not in the city public right-of-way. So why don't we have an equal fairness in our town where we should all pay the same into the same fund and all pay equally for that service of taking care of our water when it rains? Thank you.
So why don't we start with our District 3 candidates, Julie Grantham.
Well, thank you for your question. I'm in one of those old subdivisions, too. I have a lot of water in my backyard and had to get that basement repaired because the blocks were all full of water last year. So I believe that, in fact, is a good point. I'm not sure if it's feasible always in the older subdivisions to build retention ponds now. Perhaps if there is a house that isn't selling, maybe a retention pond could be put in that situation. But it certainly brings up an equity issue, and I understand your point, but I think I'd have to do more research because I'd be unfamiliar, to give you a good answer at this time.
Thank you. Susan Boyer.
And I live in one of those subdivisions where, yes, we have just spent lots of money to have our own subdivision sump collection system cleared. We have 3 retention ponds that we have to maintain. And when I took over as president 7 years ago, there was 0 money for any of that. And so over the past 7 years, having to figure out what could not be bought and what could not be paid for so that we built up enough money so that we can get those detention ponds maintained, we now have some money that we can start to have those maintained. I don't think it's fair that some subdivisions have to pay for it and other people are having the city help them out. So I feel, yes, there has to be equity somewhere. The older subdivisions, like you say, how do you help them out if there's no places to put ponds in, or do you have to build new drains? But because it's a citywide problem and the water has to go somewhere, I don't think each little subdivision should be held accountable to figure out what to do with their water, because in the bigger plan, we didn't really know how we fit into the bigger part of the city of where our water can go, but we just realized we had something we had to do, and if we didn't do it, the city was going to come in, do it for us, and give us all a fixed amount of money that we were going to have to pay, and we knew if we did it ourselves, it would be cheaper, so we had to do that. But yeah, I would definitely have to look into how we could make it more equitable, but yes, definitely, I think everybody should be working towards that.
Mr. Hetrick.
That's a very good question. In fact, I'm looking at the goals for City Council for 2016, and one of them is establish neighborhood drain maintenance and education programs, including the Homeowners Association Leadership and Solution for Drain Maintenance Funding. The challenge there is, yes, there are drains or detention ponds that are part of subdivisions. Those connect to the city drains. The city owns and operates the city drains. Subdivisions own and operate their detention basins or detention ponds. And it's unfortunate, but the responsibility to maintain those things is that of the subdivision. The city will help. And an SAD, or a special assessment district, could be put in place to try to offset some of that funding. So what I'll say just to conclude here is we know that's an issue. And it's actually an issue that is now before the Public Safety and Infrastructure Technical Review Committee, which I'm a member of. And we'll be working toward a drain maintenance program. And the other thing we'll be working toward, which is a similar issue, has to do with sump pump discharge. And that's another place whereby water has to go somewhere, and we want it to be able to discharge into city drains versus other locations. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tisdall.
I think one of the things that Mr. Beaton pointed out is that we are very fortunate that our storm sewers and our sanitary sewers are separated right now. That's part of being a relatively young city. EPA is going in and requiring that of several cities, and those are tens of billions of dollars worth of investment. Along the lines of what Mr. Hetrick said, as many of these subdivisions were built in the last 20 to 30 years, there was a concept, maybe even longer than 30 years ago, there was a concept of conservation development that was leaving privately owned land that's deed restricted. In the subdivision that we lived in, my wife was the association president for 16 years. We had to sell our house and move so she could get away from it. But we have about 1,100 acres of conservation development in this city, and it creates those kinds of privately owned challenges. The subdivision we lived in for 22 years had 3 retention ponds. There were EPA requirements, there were city requirements, but it's a huge challenge. It's one of the benefits of having 1,100 acres of conservation development in these green spaces funded and maintained with private monies all over the city, but it does create the challenges that Mr. Hetrick raised. Those retention and detention ponds do flow into the city storm sewer system, and as I said, that fund balance is zero in the next year and a half to 2 years. So it's a concern.
Bill Soul.
Thanks for your question. There's whether we have it as a special assessment district or whether the retention ponds are, paid for by the homeowners in that neighborhood, I think there's always some sort of unfairness to that. It seems like as a community, as a city as a whole, we want fairness. It benefits the city as a whole. At the same time, you can look at the other side of the coin, and somebody's going to say, why do I have to pay for their retention pond? It doesn't benefit me. And honestly, I don't know enough about the issue. I'd love to talk to you about it a little bit more to find out more. But as a community, I think we do have to consider the fairness of having certain neighborhoods pay for their retention ponds and others not.
Mr. Hetrick.
Yes, thanks. There was one thing that I should have mentioned. Even with my short vision glasses on, I can see Mr. Schneck there in the back of the room, and it reminded me that he had applied for and won a grant to assess our storm sewer, storm drain systems in a way by which we can use that information to come up with solutions by which we can deal with this issue and/or problem. And again, part of that assessment will end up as due diligence, if you will, in the Public Safety Infrastructure Technical Review Committee as we begin to build a recommendation around that particular item. So it's another piece of the puzzle that we're working on to get a solid resolution for residents so that while it may not always feel fair, we're doing the best thing we can to assure that things like drainage or detention ponds or whatnot are handled in the best possible way. Thank you.
We started out this evening with oil and gas questions, and this is a follow-up for a couple of our candidates.
Good evening. This is a question for the 2 sitting city council members. Why did you vote in favor of this lease without asking us, the voters, what we thought of it, especially in light of the fact that in 2011 we passed a charter amendment specifically prohibiting drilling in certain parts of our cities, the parks, the cemetery?
Mr. Tisdall.
Sure. Thank you. I voted, I think I'm the only one up here that voted for approval of the oil and gas lease by the city. I not only voted for it, but I made the motion to get it on the table. I believe the lease protects the city. When you talk about drilling, the lease, the negotiated lease that we signed, did a number of things. Number one, it prohibits drilling on the city-owned land that's covered by the lease. Not only does it prohibit drilling, again, it prohibits the oil and or gas drilling company from even entering the park or the cemetery. It was not brought up to a city vote because the lease did not trigger a city vote. The very first question I asked back in October of 2012 was, are surface rights and mineral rights severable? And Mr. Sterin, our city attorney, said yes, they are separate. They exist separately. That was confirmed in the dismissal ruling and order by Judge Alexander in the Oakland County Circuit Court. But one test is, let's flip this around entirely. Let's say that the city council did nothing and that oil or gas was discovered beneath our city-owned lands. We were pulled into a compulsory pooling lease, and we were subject to the rulings of the supervisor of wells and lost control over our city lands or our cemetery, and didn't receive any royalty payments until the costs were recouped, plus penalties that the supervisor of wells applies when entering a compulsory pooling lease. I don't think an equal or greater number of citizens of this city would be happy with that result either. So for me, the choice was do nothing and hope for the best, or approve a city negotiated lease that prohibited drilling, prohibited fracking, and even prohibited the companies from entering the city-owned lands.
Mr. Hetrick?
Thank you. I think Mr. Tisdale covered most of the items around the lease agreement itself. And while this may not be an answer that the questioner would appreciate, I'd rather look into the future than spend time evaluating the past. And the future is the oil and gas ordinance, which we've already talked about. 1,000-foot setback totally protects, totally prohibits hydraulic fracturing. Can only site a well in industrial zone. We mentioned all those things already. Those protect the city. Those protect the residents. We've done our job as city council to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of our residents with the oil and gas ordinance. And while I'd like to spend time, I'll say, debating the merits or dismerits of the lease, I'd rather look forward. We've got a great ordinance in place, and it protects us and protects the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Soul?
Yeah. You know, I've watched that meeting online at least 3 times, and I've read the transcript, read the minutes, and I felt like Mr. Yalamanchi and Mr. Rosen at the time wanted to table the matter till they could do further research, and that wasn't done. And I think that's what should have been done. The lease was voted on in the new business section of the agenda, so there was no public comment available. It should have been tabled till the following meeting at least, so that the residents could have an opportunity to comment on it, and as well as give council more time to consider approving the lease.
Thank you. If you'll hold your applause, please, until the end. And your question is for?
My question is for everybody. Over the last number of years, there have been a lot of pretty major issues that have affected the city that the residents have become very concerned about. Some has been the oil and gas leasing. Others was the water reservoirs. We've had open space, placement of cell phone towers. And what I've noticed is that resident concerns weren't really meaningfully addressed until it became very highly escalated. There were lawsuits. There were maybe 200 or 300 people filling city council. What I'd like to ask you is what you're going to do to make sure that our norm becomes, instead of waiting for things to escalate and spending a lot of our taxpayer money, time, energy on fixing a big problem, a significant problem, what are we going to do to change our norm to where we put our very best thinking prior to that level of escalation? Because I do have a concern, or there's a concern that things have to get to that level before we take a more meaningful view and a creative view of what we can do to make a difference in these issues. So what would you personally do to change that norm?
Let's start with Susan Boyer.
Listen, totally listen to what the residents of this city want. That the amendment that we did in 2011, I was one of the presidents of the subdivisions that put that together, and Mr. Sterin knew full well that we wanted it to be above and below the park, that it wouldn't be severable, that there would be nothing allowed to go on under a park or over it. But in the interest of making that ballot proposal short, those things were severed off, and we were told, oh, it was implied that they would never do anything below the city. Then we came about and we had to do that because we knew we couldn't trust city council and the mayor to make decisions that were good for the city. Yes, luckily we're ranked number 9th right now, the best place in America to live. Let's stay there. But the only reason we're going to stay there is by making sure that we listen to our residents to make sure that our city is a desirable place to be. We're not going to sell it short. We're not going to rush out and try and make money on it, that in the end, for the future for our children, will be a place that nobody wants to live.
Julie Grantham.
I am certainly going to be open to anything that residents tell me, and I'll do my due diligence to explore issues. I also would, as Representative Weber does, I'd like to have maybe monthly coffees or, meet somewhere with residents if someone wants to stop by and tell me their concerns. But I'm certainly going to respond to emails and phone calls and meet with folks as possible. So try to be very open and listening.
Bill Soul.
Thank you. Again, if you check my website, I talk about repeatedly respect for treating our residents respectfully when they come into this chamber with a concern. Often it seems like their concerns are brushed aside, and that's not right. And part of that problem is I think we have a city government that's very closely politically aligned, and they're going this direction, and it doesn't matter who's in their way or what other options there might be, we're going that way. And that's probably why these, when the residents come in here, they're treated the way they are. Because, their ideas, the residents' ideas at times aren't part of the plan, and so we're just going to plow forward.
Mark Tisdall.
Thank you. I think that listening is a great concept, and when that lease was put before us starting in October of 2012, we knew a few things. We knew that there was a lease passed 7 years earlier on a unanimous vote of that council with a total of eight minutes of public comment. When we entertained the lease in the first reading, and then in December in the second reading, I think we had a total of 3 people come forward and make public comments. Doing nothing was not a benign choice at the time. Again, there was always the threat of a compulsory lease. You're assuming that simply because we didn't act, that the leasing company would just sit back and wait. There were over 400 other leases signed by private residents, in this city. So, no one knew what the deadline or the timetable was at the time. So, listening is a great thing, but you look at past history, you look at precedents, you look at the city charter, and you rely upon the information that's brought forward by, in that particular instance, our city attorney, who's been our city attorney for 27 years, our economic development director, and you make a decision and move forward.
Dale Hetrick.
Thank you. Well, the way I see it, accolades like Michigan's safest city, lowest cost per capita police services through the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, Money Magazine's top 10 places to live, nation's top 50 fastest rising home values, Michigan's second lowest unemployment rate, are pretty good things. And they take a lot of work behind the scenes to get those things done. It's not just doing things because, I guess people think we do things just because we feel like it. And that just isn't true. Let me read you from the charter what our job is. To promote ethical, representative government and prosperity of the municipality, and to do such acts and to pass and enforce ordinances and resolutions to provide for the peace, health, and safety of persons and property, and to provide for the protection and preservation of the natural environment. That's our job. That's why we're aligned on a regular basis. We agree to do those things. So it's not a matter of us sitting in a room saying, hey, I just agree wholeheartedly with you. But I'll add a few other things with regard to what we do to actually listen to residents. Folks may have mentioned that we did a survey of residents, and they told us what they wanted. Here's the list. One of the highest priorities was widening Tinkin Road. Guess what? We did it. And we pulled ahead the activity from Livernois to Adams. I think we listened to residents there. They wanted local roads fixed. I mentioned in my opening comments, I put $3 million dedicated to local road maintenance. We listened to residents there too. Residents also said in the survey they wanted additional firefighter EMS personnel to improve response time. We did that, and we did it as a ballot proposal. First, the residents asked for it in the survey, then we did it as a ballot proposal, and guess what? The ballot proposal was overwhelmingly supported by residents. So I think to achieve the things I said earlier, those milestones happened because we did the hard work that I just described. Tinkin Road, EMS, et cetera. Thank you. And by the way, those things were what residents wanted.
So unfortunately, our time has come to a close, or close to a close. So this is going to be the last question, and then we'll go into closing statements. And this is actually only for the District 3 candidates. And then actually, we'll give you a chance, and then we'll give the at-large. So for more than 20 years of discussion have been held with regard to installing a traffic light at Rochester Road between Avon and Hamlin. Do you agree that a light is necessary in this area? And if so, would you support and put efforts forth to see that this is accomplished? So let's start with Julie Grantham.
Thank you. I do know that there is a propensity for accidents when folks attempt to turn left on Rochester Road. And so, of course, safety is always a concern of your city council members. So I do know that there is some disagreement among these subdivision members. And so I think that we're going to have to maybe meet with the people in the particular subdivisions and ask them, what their viewpoint is. Is there another option, perhaps, that we could pursue? But I'm afraid I don't really like making left-hand turns myself when there's no traffic lights. So I would prefer one with a green arrow, truthfully. But I think that this would be something we have to listen to the residents in the particular area and find out what their desires and concerns are.
Susan Boyer.
Yes, there's lots of accidents in that area. There's numerous roads that come out that are not aligned with each other, and they're staggered. So when one person is pulling out, another person's pulling into that left turn lane in order to make a left, but somebody's making a left into that lane to go south, and so you'll have a lot of accidents occur in that area. I definitely think there should be a light there. I think there's a lot of issues with the roads and how they line up and where an actual light would be, but I think it does need diligence by city to try and work with the subdivisions to determine where a light could go. And of course, I believe the state of Michigan has the final say on where a light goes on that area.
Thank you. Mark Tisdall.
Well, I believe wholeheartedly that there needs to be a light there. MDOT has approved the installation of a traffic signal at a realigned Eddington Boulevard and Drexel Gate intersection. Getting that done has proven to be very difficult. We've been in long-term negotiations, Councilman Wiggins and I, with MDOT, with city administration, city Engineering and the current owner of that land, and there's a remaining legal ambiguity relative to what to do with the land and how it would be titled, platted, et cetera, for the old Eddington Boulevard. And there's some concern that you know, it could involve litigation, and the whole thing has just kind of stalled out right now, unfortunately. But yes, we very much need a light in that 1 mile strip. MDOT will approve it at a realigned Eddington Boulevard Drexel Gate intersection.
Dale Hetwick.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'll add much to Mr. Tisdale's comments because I totally agree. There needs to be a traffic light on a realigned Eddington and Drexel Gate. As he mentioned, that's the only place that MDOT will approve a traffic light. And while I'm going to say this, it's a personal thing also for me. Some of you know I was in a pretty serious auto accident 2 years ago. If it weren't for the good work of our public safety team, I probably wouldn't be here today. And in my view, having a traffic light at a realigned Eddington and Drexel Gate may have slowed that individual down. And I think for the, as I said before, our job is the health, safety, and welfare of residents. And to put a traffic light there is a high priority for the health, safety, and welfare of our residents, because I do not, I will say this very clearly, I do not want to see anyone die as a result of that. I came very close. I don't want to see anyone have that happen. We need to fix that. Thank you.
Bill Soul.
I too would agree that we need a traffic light at that intersection. The other concern I would have is increased traffic that may be on Drexel Gate. You know, because it would be so much easier to turn left out of Drexel Gate with a signal there. So that would, you know, be something else that I would just want to consider, whether a stop sign has to be put in somewhere halfway down Drexel Gate between, you know, Rochester and Livernois, or what we need to do there.
Thank you very much. So now it's time for our 30-second closing statements. We will be having those statements in reverse order from the opening statements and, of course, be timing them. So we'll start with our District 3 Council candidates. And first up is Julie Grantham.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. That, you know, running for office is not easy, so I commend everybody for running for office. And, you know, everyone should be congratulated for taking the responsibility and taking the steps to put themselves out here and actually run for office. My experiences with nonprofit boards, public service, law, business, economics, elderly issues, youth issues, they well qualify me to serve on City Council. My deep roots in Rochester Hills
Thank you, Ms.
will
Grantham.
ensure.
Susan Boyer.
Thank you all for coming tonight and listening to us and proposing some great questions so you can understand where we come from. I have a passion for this city. I love this city. I plan on being here for a long time. I have a wealth of experience in the education area, working in the city working with City Council as a homeowner association president. So I have a lot of that experience as well. But I really have a passion for this city and making it a great, safe, enjoyable city to live in. Thank you.
And now for our at-large candidates. We'll start with Dale Hetwick.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of tonight's event. I've demonstrated 3 important elements defining the right candidate for Rochester Hills City Council: proven experience, proven leadership, exceptional results. Please retain Dale Hetwick as your Rochester Hills at-large City Councilman. Thank you.
Mark Tisdale.
Thank you, Ms. Gribbs, for your,
You're welcome.
again, facilitating this forum and the opportunity to speak directly to the voters. As I said in my opening comments, the success and the greatness of this city is built upon its exceptional population base. I take this oath of office that whoever the city council members will be very seriously. That's to support and defend the Michigan and U.S. constitutions and the city charter. And I hope to have earned your vote and be returned to this office. Thank you.
And finally, Bill Soul.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here tonight. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting the event. You know, for me personally, I've had this lifelong dream of attaining elected office. And at the same time, you know, I see a flawed city government. You know, as I stated before, we're just too closely politically aligned, and we need to respect the wishes of our residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In addition to the candidates that you've met here tonight, there are 3 proposals on our November ballot. The proposals cover 3 areas: the Older Person Commission's millage, a Rochester Avon Recreation Authority RARA millage renewal, and a bonding proposal for the Rochester Community School District. I encourage you to go to the lwvoa.org website and read up on these 3 important proposals before you vote on them on November 3rd. So just a bit of information. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcasted several times for viewing on Comcast Channel 20, on WOW Channel 10, and on AT&T's Channel 99, running through Election Day, November 3rd. Please check the city's website at rochesterhills.org for the days and the times of those viewings. But you can also view this entire council debate as well as the mayoral debate on demand on the city's website. Again, the website address is rochesterhills.org. I'd like to say a special thank you to the City of Rochester Hills for providing tonight's terrific venue, to the city employees that have helped, including Jason Dale and Eric Perry, for their assistance tonight. Thank you, audience, for your great questions. I'm sorry we couldn't necessarily get to all of them. On behalf of Ann Edwards, the coordinator for tonight's forum, and the League of Women Voters, Oakland area, I'd like to thank all our candidates. That we really appreciate your time. And remember, vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you very much, and good night.
Nice job. You're welcome.
We'll take a short intermission, and we'll return with the mayoral candidates shortly. Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Good evening again. My name is Carla Brisboy-Gribbs, and I'm here to help moderate the League of Women Voters Oakland Area Candidate Forum, this time for Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills. For those of you who were in the audience earlier, you know that I'm a longtime resident of the City of Rochester, a regional manager for DT Energy, and a member of the League of Women Voters Oakland Area. The League of Women Voters is really an important organization. We appreciate your support. We're a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We work to increase the understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. The Voter's Guide, which we've created, will be on our website at the end of September. The website is lwvoa.org. That's lwvoa.org. Before we get started, I would like to remind our audience to please shut off your cell phones and your electronic devices so we're not interrupted during the debate. We will now present to you candidates vying for the position of Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills. Two candidates' names, Jim Stevens and Ravi Yalamanchi, will appear on the November 3rd general election ballot. Brian Barnett is running as a write-in candidate, and his name will not appear on the ballot. The League of Women Voters policy does allow candidates who have filed as a write-in and have been certified by the clerk as a valid candidate for having their votes counted that they may be included in a forum if that occurs before the forum date and that the League is able to confirm the clerk's certification. So tonight, we have three candidates sitting before you. The candidate ultimately elected to the position of mayor will receive a four-year term with an annual salary of $113,999. You know what? That's not the right number at all. $113,996 annual salary. Get that? 113,996. The position of mayor is a term limited for 2 four-year terms. The mayor is responsible for seeing more than 500 full-time and part-time employees and a budget of more than $100 million in the city of Rochester Hills. The candidates have drawn for the order of speaking and will introduce themselves with a brief 1-minute opening statement. Following the opening statement, the candidates will respond to questions from our audience. Questions can be directed to any and all of the candidates. Each candidate will also have the opportunity to respond to any question asked. Rebuttals will also be allowed. Candidates have been asked to limit their answers to 2 minutes or less, and I do remind our candidates that the questions and responses may only address issues that pertain to the position of mayor. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. We ask that the audience please hold your responses, hold your applause, and your comments till the conclusion of the program. We now will begin with the opening statements with our mayoral candidates. First up is Ravi Yalamanchi. Mr. Yalamanchi.
Good evening. I am Ravi Yalamanchi. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate. My wife Anita and I have been residents of Rochester Hills for the past 18 years. As you probably know, I served on the City Council for 8 years, have been Treasurer and Commissioner of OPC, and Commissioner of Paint Creek Trailways. My education background includes an undergraduate degree in science, law degree, MA from EMU, MBA from University of Michigan, and a certified planner. For the past 18 years, I've been the CEO of Metro Community Development. I'm the only candidate here with a proven track record of 30 years of business management, finance, budgeting, and community planning experience that I will bring to the office of mayor. It is truly an honor to be a candidate for mayor of our wonderful city, Rochester Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Yalamanchi. Next up, Jim Stevens. Mr. Stevens.
Greetings to all residents. My name is Jim Stevens. I come from a very poor family, and I became very well situated in my well-being. As mayor, I plan to give back half my salary, give back to the community, ones who have fallen victim of illness, hardship, single parents who have lost their jobs, to help them pay bills. I don't need a salary. I'm pretty well to do for myself. The reason I'm running for mayor is to help our city families all come together, chip in, and help. That's what it's all about. It's not about greed. There's a saying that you can fill a room full of gold, but you'll never take it with you. That is very true. I want to give back to the community in need, and that's why I'm running for mayor. As far as my business background, I started my own business at the age of 18, started work at the age of 15. I know what hard work is.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And our third candidate is Brian Barnett. Mr. Barnett.
Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been blessed to serve as your mayor for the last 9 years. And since day one, my goal has been to make Rochester Hills the preeminent place to live, work, and raise your family. And over that time, the city has experienced unprecedented success. We have managed your money exceptionally well, achieving a AAA bond rating while keeping your taxes the lowest among cities our size. We've invested in public safety by reducing response times and are now recognized as the safest city in our state. We've aggressively worked to attract high-technology companies, creating over 5,000 new jobs and lowered unemployment to historic levels. We took bold leadership to revolutionize recycling and are now Michigan's #1 recycling community. We've invested in roads and parks and have among the fastest rising property values anywhere in the nation. And because of all these incredible accomplishments, we were named one of the top 10 best places to live anywhere in the nation. Leadership, results, and a record of accomplishment. Tonight, I am asking for your support to write in my name and fill in the circle. Thank you.
Now comes the fun part. We get to ask questions. So I'll be starting on that side of the room tonight. And I would ask that you get right to your question, and in addition, that you identify who you, up front, who you would like to have answer that question.
Question is for.
Pardon me. My question is for Mayor Barnett, and I ask that you listen very carefully, please. As an elected public official in the city for numerous years, a length beyond what was customary for your predecessors, my question is, as the seasoned public servant you are, why are you choosing to take advantage of the ambiguous language within the city's charter in order to promote a Barnett agenda rather than a City of Rochester Hills agenda?
Mr. Barnett.
Sure, well, nothing like easing right into it tonight. Certainly prepared for that question. Thank you for your question. Let me respond to that in the depth that I am allowed to in the time I have to respond. First of all, I don't think there's anything ambiguous about the language. In fact, the language is quite clear. Our city forefathers envisioned a situation like this, where if the residents of Rochester Hills desired to keep a sitting mayor or city council member, they wanted to always retain the right to do that. Our city has always been exceptionally, it's always been held in exceptional importance for them to pick who leads them. And so the language is exceptionally clear. Our forefathers put that into the charter. And legally, it's been backed up by not only our city attorney, but we had a review by the top election official in the state. And trust me, if there was any ambiguity, my colleagues up here would certainly challenge me to do this. I'm running, specifically to your question, because of the Barnett agenda that you just mentioned is one I'm pretty proud of, and one I think the residents are pretty proud of. My opening statement indicates a lot of the things that we've been able to accomplish over the last 8 years, and I frankly believe we have a lot more we can do. When it comes to term limits, I think it's pretty interesting. I think the residents of Rochester Hills, I trust them to pick who they think is best fit to lead this community. And I think that in the end, I hope that this election year, that they'll continue to see that there are some great things going, and that I'm the person who's been at the helm over the last 8 years and am best equipped to continue to deliver on the results that the Rochester Hills residents are accustomed to seeing. Thank you for your question.
And your question is for?
Mr. Yalamachi. What is your definition of public service, and do you think it is important to honor the city charter, and why?
Mr. Yalamachi. You know, we can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, public service is a noble profession. That's how the country started out when the first leaders of our country formed the Congress. That noble profession today has been really exploited in many wrong ways. public officials are really not respected because they really don't do what they mean. For me, public service is very important. It is about serving the community. It's not promoting my personal agenda or putting myself before the community. I truly would like to see a lot of good people come into public service, but really stay focused on serving the community. In terms of term limits, let me first thank the mayor for his service, both as a council member and as mayor. As he said, he served as the mayor for a little over 9 years, or 9.5 years. In 2011, when he got reelected, in March of 2012, his State of the City address, he announced that he was going to do a write-in. In 2013 State of the City address, he announces the applicability of it is limited to Mr. Rose and I, the previous council members and mayors. If there was no ambiguity, what was the need for attorneys and spend city's funding on it? There was ambiguity in it, so the attorneys were used and city expenditures were incurred. And now the city clerk has to go through an extensive process to facilitate this. Once elected to elected office, no matter who it is, should serve to the best of their ability and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Yalamanchi.
Thank you.
And your question is for?
Gribbs, can I rebut that?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important, since obviously this is where we started tonight, to clearly understand this. There is no ambiguity in the language, period. The residents voted on this in 1992, and we're fortunate enough to still have several of the council members who supported this here to talk to them. I think some of them are raising their hands in the crowd, to talk about what their intent was. The residents of Rochester Hills have the ability to pick who they want to lead. I trust them to do that, and I don't understand why Mr. Yalamanchi does not. If you look at someone who's doing a good job, the residents should have the ability to keep them. I'm trying to think of a sports analogy. Tom Izzo, when his contract is up, the Spartans don't say, you know what, it's time for someone new. No, they look to keep a good person on the job who's doing a good job doing what they're paid to do, and that's what I'm suggesting, absolutely following the exact language that the residents approved in the charter.
Mr. Yalamanchi.
Thank you. Good job doesn't mean that one is entitled to it. This is not an entitlement program. If we want to be in sports or if we want to be in entertainment and have the contract signed over and over again, then that's where we should be. Public servants should respect the charter, the Constitution. What's the purpose of having the term limits language then if that's the case? Thank you.
Okay, so your question is for?
Mr. Mayor Burnett, the environment is very important to me and my
for perpetual preservation. Perhaps the thing that maybe we're most known for, though, in my administration is what we've done with recycling. And I brought to this city an idea to revolutionize recycling. I remember crowds this big saying it could never happen. We were the first in Michigan, and actually the first between New Mexico and New Jersey, to incentivize recycling. At the time, we only had 18% of our people recycling on a daily basis or a weekly basis. After we incentivized recycling, took bold leadership to add to this new program, we now have about 85%. We're the #1 recycling community in Michigan. In furtherance to that plan, which many people in many communities have followed now, I've also been asked to chair the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments Green Infrastructure Committee over the last 2 years. And probably the pinnacle was in 2014 when I was elected and inducted into the Michigan Green Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you. And your question is for?
My question is for all three candidates. Residents have approved 3 millage redirections to fix their local roads. The local street fund presently has a $6.7 million balance. That's 65% of the budget. Typically cities, successful cities over 50,000 carry a 25% balance, and under 10,000 residents carry a balance like that. This balance is projected to be carried for the next 3 years. How would you manage this surplus?
Let's start with Jim Stevens. Mr. Stevens.
Well, as a homeowner and taxpayer myself, I like to keep taxes low. spend what you have and what you don't have financial meetings and strategies put out, see what your interest rates are, get the lowest interest rate, and work with the residents. You guys are the taxpayers, the voters. I'm a taxpayer. I want what the majority wants, not my own agenda. I have no ties to contractors, no outside influences. My influence is your influence. So as mayor, I plan to serve you all.
Thank you. Mr. Yalamachi?
Thank you. One of the things we have done when I was on council was we don't have any millage. We did not have any millage for our local roads. So one of the things I've strongly advocated, and it has been adapted, was as the millages were expiring, we targeted those expired millages to local roads. We have about 1.2 mills. So it generates about somewhere between 3.5, 3.75. So that guarantees some local road funding every year. Plus we get some state funding on top of it. In 2009, when we were doing 2010 budget, every year I was advocating for us to put money in local roads. We did finally put the money in 2010 budget. When 2010 came along, the budget amendment was zeroed out for local roads. It was not that we did not have money. Every year we were adding surplus to the budget, but we did not. 8, 9, 10 were recession years, but Rochester Hills was pretty fortunate still. It's important that we need to invest in local roads. 2013 was my last year on council. The Police and Road Committee advocated for $5 million for local roads, and the administration put in only $3 million. I made a motion that for 14, 15, and 16, asked the council to increase it to $5 million based on the road company recommendation. And my colleagues did support it, and it did pass. I think we need to increase, personally, if Ravi Almanchi became the mayor, I would like to see the road funding go up to $6 million, because it's important we invest in local roads. It adds to the quality of life. It adds to the economic value of our neighborhoods. So we need to invest in local roads. Thank you.
Brian Barnett?
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. Over the past 5 years, we've invested more in local roads than at any time in our city's history. And I think you see that as you drive around town. If you mentally drive through our community, the east-west roads in our community have all been redone or are slated to be done next year. The north-south roads have all been done in the last 4 years, with a couple exceptions that are slated to be done in the next year. The problem in Mr. Yalamachi's statement is a big error, and I think you'll see that tonight. You have to listen to your experts. We have a great team. In fact, our fleet team was named one of the top 100 in the nation out of 39,000. And they've told us that the maximum that they think we can do, given Michigan's seasonal challenges and the amount of construction traffic that you're willing to put up with as residents, is about $5 million. And you saw that last year when Tinkin was down and Walton and Avon was down, the stress we saw on Walton Boulevard. This year we had 2 roads between the major roads east-west that were being done. We've looked at this and said, basically we've had to push some projects back because we don't want you to go crazy trying to get across the city. Here's the point that I think is important, and this is what I'm exceptionally proud of. Over the last 4 years, we've invested in what has been our residents' #1 issue, roads, more so than any other administration. And the unique thing that we've done is that of the $115 million invested in our roads, only 11% of that came from your city tax dollars, right? We've leveraged the county, we've leveraged the state, and we've leveraged grants to make the dollars go a lot farther. Additionally, we've taken roads like Tinkin, and because we have that fund balance that you mentioned, sir, we leveraged that to bring that project that wasn't scheduled to be done until 2017 to be done in 2015, trying to bring projects forward to realize that relief for our residents sooner rather than later. So it is good that we have that balance. We do check with our professionals to make sure we're utilizing the maximum that we can, but we really have reached about the maximum that we can do according to our professionals.
Mr. Yalamachi?
Thank you. You know, as a CEO, you have to make certain decisions. Without a doubt, you have to take input from your professionals. But you also have to plan strategically. if the local capacity of our own internal capacity is maximized, then you have to look at leveraging or bringing in periodically outside contractors to get the roads done. The funding for Tinkin Road got delayed, and then some of the roads happen all at the same time. You're seeing on Hamlin, you're seeing on Tinkin. There has to be extensive planning done on this. So I think just saying the fact that, well, professionals suggested we can't do it, that's not the way to go. We need to plan strategically and invest and make sure our roads are done. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes, and that's, Mr. Yalamachi, is exactly what we've done. Your answer was in your question. You do seek outside assistance. We work very closely with our partners. That's what I mentioned. We leverage and pay about a dime on the dollar for the road work we get done, is because we have excellent relationships with the Road Commission and with MDOT, and we've been able to leverage that dollars. And those are the folks that tell us when and how far we can get in a road project in a particular season. And frankly, we've turned a lot of bad roads into much better roads, and I think the residents recognize that. Thank you.
Who's your question for?
All the candidates. I'd like to first thank two of the candidates for publicly endorsing the Rochester Community School Bond, which will be on the next ballot. My question is, with the Rochester Community School District's recent projection of declining enrollment due to a demographic shift in our community, what are your plans for the city to encourage and enable young families to live in Rochester Hills?
Let's start with Brian Barnett.
It's a great question, thank you. And I was one of those two candidates to publicly support it, was wearing the button as I was campaigning just a few hours before the start of the debate today. My kids are in the audience. They attend West Middle School and University Hills, and we are huge fans of the Rochester Community School District. And although we haven't personally attended the Avondale District, that is an important part of our community. The question you mentioned is important, and it represents really a strategic plan for the city. I'm really proud of what we've done as a city in terms of our strategic plan. We are probably the envy of most communities around us. We have a 7-year forecast. We have a 6-year capital improvement plan. We have a 5-year transportation plan, and we have a 3-year budget. And in those, we're always looking at ways that we can engage different segments of the community. And affordable housing, if there is one critique about the city, is one that we often get. The average new price of average newly constructed home in the city last year was $580,000. That leaves a lot of folks out of the market. And the other thing that we have that drives our population is we have the most robust senior programming. The OPC is outstanding, and it drives a lot of development. 3 of our major developments right now are senior housing. And of course, that doesn't drive the school numbers. So we work closely with Dr. Shaner and the school district administration. We've been a part of some of their studies that have looked at demographic changes. We look at an economic development, from an economic development standpoint, to try to figure out how can we bring more affordable housing into the community, and how can we make it still there to be a way and an avenue for families to continue to live here in the city of Rochester Hills and populate our school district. Thank you.
Jim Stevens.
Well, to me, education is a very important foundation of our youth. It's a starting point for young children to educate themselves, to be able to achieve a good career in life. But also, from the budget standpoint, I have a daughter who is attending Oakland University. In the last few years, I think lately they had like a 20%, somewhere plus or minus, increases. And I'm the type of person that says, when somebody asks for a 10% raise or 20% raise, you better justify it. I look at the cost. Education is important for our children, but you can't raise the cost beyond where kids can't afford it or the homeowners can't afford it. So if the school district asks for a 10% increase, I want to go through every line item, books increase, something in the cost structure. You know, people just come on and say, hey, I need an extra $100 this week, you know. I says, well, okay, tell me what for, why, when, where, you know. Education is important, but cost to our taxpayers, part of the job of running the city is controlling costs. And you better be sure Big Jim does not let any large costs slide just under the carpet under my watch. Thank you.
Ravi Alamachi.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of the proposal of the schools. It is very important that a community have a strong educational system. Schools is what attracts families into the community. Recently, there was an article that our teachers at Rochester schools were recognized as some of the best teachers. Having great teachers will ensure that our kids will have great education. But we have a trend and a demographic shift happening in our community. This started a while ago, but it is going to be more coming through. It's called aging in place. You know, the age, people in 90s, I've seen some and met some. Somebody getting to 100 will be a norm. Our population and demographic shift into aging in place will be about a little over 25% by 2020, which means the enrollment numbers in the schools will drop. So the schools have to rethink what they have to do. Government has to think what they have to do, and businesses and services. Everybody has to rethink. One of the ideas that I want to pursue, which means this idea would mean working with the state, is introducing an economic policy, because some families, young families, do get priced out. But we have in our city neighborhoods that can really use some revitalization. And these are older homes. If invested in it, young families can come in. The economic policy I want to try is, if any family that moves into the city and buys an old home and refurbishes and improves it, increases the square footage, I want to work to see if we can freeze the taxable value for them when they come in, and that the increase in taxable value will be only 10% to the full value. It'll take about 10 years. We need to be creative in our economic policy thinking, work with the state, and institute a policy like that so that we can encourage young families to come in, so they can come in with the affordability they can afford and stay in our community, because we need young families in our community. It is the kids that will keep our schools active, because if the number of kids drop, then it'll mean that schools have to rethink about closing down some schools. And some communities have already been seeing that. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important to underscore just how closely we've worked with the schools. For those of you in the crowd and watching at home who have long memories, know that the City of Rochester Hills and the school district didn't always get along. And we've worked really hard to repair those relationships in a way that now, when we were recognized last week as being the safest city in the state, I stood alongside Dr. Shaner because we celebrated that together. We were recognized as one of the top 10 places to live in the country. We asked our residents, why do you like living here? Two reasons tied for number one: the schools and the natural amenities. And I think those two things, we recognize that as a leadership team, and we've worked extremely hard to reach out to the schools, understanding the importance they play in our community.
Thank you. And your question is for?
My question is for Mayor Barnett and also the other members as well. The 2011 Charter Amendment clearly stated that you couldn't sell or you couldn't lease the parklands without a vote of the citizenry. The argument made in the prior debate was that we had a choice between doing nothing or leasing the property. That was a false choice. That's nonsense. The fact of the matter is the real choice was between allowing the residents an opportunity to vote the issue, in other words, making your case to the residents, or pursuing your own personal agenda, which is exactly what happened. My question to the mayor is this: why didn't you make the case to the citizens and bring this issue to a vote?
Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Appreciate the question. Obviously, you and your family have been a part of this issue since the beginning, and I figured we'd have some gas and oil discussion tonight. So let's dive in. Obviously, as a member of council, and you saw the debate earlier, I watched it from my office. There was lengthy discussion about the reasons those particular council members voted for what they did. In your specific question, and I don't have a vote as mayor. In your specific question, though, why didn't we take it to the vote of the people? You started your question with an answer that I think you've received and that we've received as an administration, that the provision that went forward was not applicable to the charter language. You know that, you received that answer, that it wasn't selling or leasing property. But about whether or not we could take it to the people, and I know you disagreed because your group sued us and the case was heard in court and the city was upheld. But the reason that we didn't take it to the people is because we have a rule about provisionary questions here in the city. So if I want to take a question to the city, based on our city attorney's advice, we can take a question to the city if it has tax implications. Should we raise 1 mil to have a new trash program? That question could go before the city. You can't say, should we rebuild a new section? If there, should we have a height on American flags or something like that? The question has to have a tax implication tied to it. So that's why you don't take a provisionary question to the ballot. It's actually illegal in the state of Michigan, according to our attorney's opinion. But the issue of gas and oil is an important one. I'll take this opportunity to address it. If you look at the results of what's happened, now obviously this is an issue that lots of folks got involved in. Of course, it's been settled now, and it's been settled for probably the last 4 or 5 months. If you look at where we are today, the city has probably the most restrictive ordinances, maybe with Auburn Hills and Shelby Township tied with us, but more so than almost anything else in the state as required by the DEQ. There was never, ever, ever, ever any permission for any surface activity anywhere in the city, from DeQuinder to Adams, from Dutton to South Boulevard. And we ended up avoiding all lawsuits from the oil companies that were pretty critical for communities to avoid, and that many communities fell victim to. And at the end, we had no action happen. And most importantly, for those of you, I know my opponent wants to keep this as an issue, but as was reported in the Oakland Press, the oil companies have completely moved out of northern Oakland County. There is nothing here. They are gone. That's why no one comes to our meetings. That's why there's no more leases being signed. That's why the issue is absolutely dead. So if you look at it from the rearview mirror now, although some may have wanted a knee-jerk reaction to ban them from the city and ban them from existence, the entire discussion was a balance of rights. The rights you have as homeowners to monetize your mineral rights versus the rights we have as a community to make sure that activity happens in appropriate areas. And at the end, the city was sued twice, upheld twice, and we've had no activity, and the oil companies are gone.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Ravi
question.
Yalamachi.
Thank you. You know, the excuse that if it's the height of the flag, we don't have to go in front of the residents for a vote. It's really a lame excuse to put it out. This is a quality of life issue, folks. How do we know what's going to happen with these oil companies? I'm not sure when I was on the council that anybody understood the implications of this. The way it popped up on the agenda, there was no prior discussion. There was no notice ahead. And when I asked the question about what about the charter amendment the residents did, the comeback to me was, well, the amendment is about above the ground. This is underneath the ground. There is such thing as, in trust, express and implied, and you don't violate either one of them. By taking extra time to reaching out to the residents and making sure by following it, I would have defended myself with the oil companies, or at least prolong the issue that these are the things I have to meet before I do anything with this. October 2012, it comes up, passes. December 2012, it comes up. January 2013, lease is signed. 18 months, the residents come to City Hall. It's almost like beating their heads to the wall to get a zoning ordinance and a pipeline ordinance. That was what should have been done at the very beginning, not with the engaged. If the residents were not engaged, I would doubt if the ordinance would have happened. There was so much research done by the residents. How come we didn't spend that much time on it? You know, even we did not hire an attorney to advise us, who's an expert on oil and gas, on the pros and cons of this. The excuse that, well, somebody's going to sue us, no. We jumped in. Or what caused us to jump in? For the life of me, I cannot understand the rush to it. It was really disappointing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And excuse me, I would really ask that there be no applause or no comments from the audience until the end of the program. Thank you. This question was for all three candidates. Mr. Jim Stevens.
Thank you very much. As far as the oil drilling, I have friends and family that own property up around Rose City, West Branch area. If you ever drove up M33, the smells of sour gas, a lot of trees have died off from methane gas leaks. A lot of the talks about the council people saying that we're protected, and there was litigation and talks about, well, it could be moved along the industrial 59 corridor. Okay, well, the summer winds come from the south. So if there was ever to be drilling along M59, anyone that lives north of M59 will smell sour gas and oil smells. I definitely do not believe this will ever belong into our city. To tell you right now, I will be the first one to go to jail. If they plan on doing any oil drilling in this city, we will have the biggest convoy to stop any oil rigs or trucks coming into our city. And you can count on that. And as far as, you know, we live in a close-knit community. You know, everyone works hard. They would like to keep their property values up. I'm in that same camp. So on that thought, oil drilling, and as far as the last city council, I offered to, as mayor, to buy back the oil leases that were sold with my own personal money, so that will not cost any of you taxpayers. That's how much I believe in our clean parks and our city homes, and that's the way I feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett.
Yes, I've learned one thing tonight, and that's that Mr. Stevens has a lot more money than I do. Mr. Yalamachi, you know, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, and your selective recollection is unfortunate because you know that we absolutely did hire an environmental firm to look over the information. You know that we had legal counsel throughout. You were part of most of those discussions, and you participated fully in those. So to act now like this is a surprise to you is disingenuous to our audience. Again, I think you go back to the purpose here. You can say all sorts of things. We wouldn't be sued. Mr. Yalamachi, there's a lot of folks in Farmington Hills that would take you to task on that after they wrote an $800,000 check for being sued by the same company we were dealing with. So there is reality when you're the mayor. There are tough decisions you have to make. You can say a lot of things when you're running for mayor, but when you're in the job, you have to act with the information you know. And the information you know is provided by environmental professionals, by the professionals you have on staff, by working with the communities that currently have drilling to find out what you can do about it. Mr. Yalamachi either ignores that advice or tells you that it's not important. To me, it was important in trying to guide this community through it. Thanks.
Mr. Yalamachi.
You know, I'm sorry to say that, but this is really laughable because there was no environmental gentleman in front of the council giving a report that night. It was the city attorney that was giving his opinion. His expertise is not in oil and gas. We did not look into the complexity of this issue. The environmental effects. What would it do to the health of families? This is an intense business if you're going to get into oil and gas, drilling or fracking. 90% water, 10% chemicals. What happens when the water comes out? How is it collected? How is it discharged? Are we equipped for that? We haven't had any of that conversation. We should have spent time on those issues. To say to me that I have loss of memory or something like that, it's truly laughable. Just look at the council meetings that night. You know, one of the things the gentleman from Jordan, Mr. Rosen, asked question, how much as a homeowner am I going to get for this? I have to give him credit. He was honest. He said, well, you may get about a dinner's night in a month. So I'm going to sacrifice $45 for my home, entire home investment. We have dense neighborhoods, schools, high traffic. And to use the excuse that somebody in Farmington got sued, so I'm going to rush in and sign the lease instead of standing up to them, it's really a shame. That's not leadership to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a yes/no question.
I don't think so.
Who's got the microphone? No, okay.
I hate to keep going on this oil and gas controversy, but this question is a little bit different. I'd like to ask all three candidates. Did you agree with the court's ruling that the citizens had no standing in challenging the mayor and the city council on the oil and gas controversy?
And I'll start with Jim Stevens.
Well, as far as having a challenge, as a voter and taxpayer, you always have a say. This is a democracy. Don't forget, we're not Russia. This is good USA. You can come down to city council and speak your piece. And I think the grassroots community will come together and show government who's in charge. And I think that all you taxpayers should always have your voice and come in and speak your mind. And as mayor, it is not my voice, it is your voice. I will do as you ask. I have no hidden agendas, and I'm definitely against oil and gas, any type of drilling, anywhere along the 59 corridor, because in the industrial areas, it's not too far from residential areas, you know? And for people selling leases for $50 or $100 so they can make that a year, I would rather pay that out of my salary to them and say, let's keep this oil and gas out of here.
Ravi Yalamanchi.
You know, it's really disappointing what the judge did for me. There have been many lawsuits in the state, in the country, where individuals have sued and won against cities and townships throughout the country. And those were decisions obviously made by those city governments, councils, or mayors. Our fundamental right in a democracy of right to vote, that being taken away, and a judge to say the council has the leeway to make decisions. I understand the council has the right to make decisions. But this particular amendment, the residents worked hard. They came to the mayor, the council, and worked with the city attorney to make sure that this amendment gets onto the charter, that because of the water reservoirs experience, they did not want any future council members or mayor to tinker with or mess with our parks and develop, or in any form of development. And that voice, that right to vote is nulled. It's really disappointing to me how this decision has come out. Thank you.
Brian Barnett.
Yes, thank you. Good question, Mr. Winch, Chief. You know, I think tonight what I hear is a bit troubling. To say that, you know, another community just like ours with the same question got sued and lost is irrelevant seems arrogant to me. To say that we shouldn't listen to the professionals that were before us seems arrogant to me. To say that we should second-guess the courts, the very democratic process that Mr. Yalamachi espouses as a citizen's right, we took. The city basically said, tell us, Judge, what is the standing on this? What is the ruling? And the judge ruled. And Don't Drill the Hills has appealed, and I think most likely you'll probably see that appeal dropped in the near future. But the courts ruled. I'm not certain what that bravado does. It might look good during a debate, but it costs residents in the end. It costs you legally, and it costs you professionally. And it's irresponsible. And I'm sorry to hear it tonight.
Mr. Yalamanchi.
You know, essentially it tells me there's no leadership. Just to say that the fact that, well, you have to look at it and it's going to cost the taxpayers. Folks, there was no discussion at the council. There was no prior discussion. There was no discussion about implications, what will happen. So all of this discussion must have happened in the back door, which I was not entitled to listen to or be part of it then. What happened to all of that then? Why was I not involved in that? Why was I not engaged in that process then, if that is true then? Obviously, if I learned all about that, I would have given input into it, whether I agree or disagreed about it. There was a fundamental misstep in leadership, and just to use some terminology or use somebody and take a cover under them, that is not leadership. You engage everybody. Even if we had to sign the lease, let's say if it's true, we got to sign this lease. Why not take some time to talk to the residents about it? Why not engage the residents with it? And let them know, here's what the challenge is. If we don't sign the lease, we're going to have a lawsuit and it's going to cost how much ever. Did any residents know about this? At least I did not know as a council member.
Thank you.
It's truly disappointing. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett.
Mr. Yalamachi asked a rhetorical question why he didn't get more involved. I can't answer that question for him, but I can tell you that the city, in large measure, worked to try to get as much information as we could in advance of this. And to flippantly say we should just listen to, quote, them, when them is the elected courts, You can't say that as a leader. You can't feign leadership by saying, oh, we're going to fight the courts every time we get a chance. No, you go to the courts to get an answer after reasonable minds, and that's how you move forward. That's how you get discussion. That's how you come to resolve. And boy, I'm curious that this type of bravado was never evident, Mr. Yalamachi, before tonight.
Mr. Stevens?
As far as what the courts, certain judge may make rulement, one person doesn't always make law. He can always be voted out of office as an elected official. But as mayor, I will have the largest convoy in this city, and trust me, I will be the first one to go to jail if an oil rig tries to drive in this city. I will do everything that I have possible means, friends from federal government, whatever it takes. Rest assured, it will not happen here.
Thank you. And your question is for?
For mainly Mr. Yalamanchi and Mr. Barnett. Since the both of you have been very involved in making budgets over the last 10 years, within the last 10 years, can you guys explain to us, can you identify spots where there's been wasteful spending? And if you can identify those spots, can you talk about what they were and how you might go about solving them?
Let's start with Ravi Yalamanchi.
Thank you. There is a fiduciary responsibility, whether it's as a council member, you plan the budgets, and then there's a fiduciary responsibility as a mayor to implement it. As a council member, one of the things I learned when I came on council was about the budget process and what's going on. When I ran for city council at the time, one of the questions that was asked is, would you be willing to merge 911 with the county? And when I asked why, they said, if you merge it, the reporter said, you will save $450,000. Would you do it? And I was not on the council, I was a candidate, and I said, well, the question sounds like, yes, I would, but I don't know the real answer to it. I really need to see what it is. So I got to the council, learned more about it. True, you can save money with that. Come to find out, I've learned that our county sheriff's department contract we have, we already pay $300,000 for providing cell phone 911 service. And then we were having our own 911 service that was costing us $1 million. Both the council as a fiduciary responsibility, the mayor as a CEO, knew about this, and we could have acted on it right away. But you know, as governments are, it took 5 years to do the merger. So we lost 5 years of opportunity and costs to save the money. Those are the kind of things that I think we need to pay attention to. And just by not knowing it is not sufficient. You have to act on it. Thank you.
Mr. Stevens. All right, actually, you said this was for Brian Barnett. I'm sorry. So, Mr. Barnett.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Mr. Kropp. I'm intimately familiar with the budget, and obviously am responsible for presenting it each and every year for the last 9 years. And there are always things that a government can do in the course of spending $100 to $150 million that can be second-guessed or looked at. But let me tell you what I'm proud of. I'm proud of what we've done with our budget. We have, as you know, the highest rating possible. When I took office, our rating was AAA, or AA. We're now at AAA. When I took office, each of you, per capita debt, we had about a $700 debt on each person. We've lowered that by 42%. We had not funded any of our unfunded liabilities. Now they're all completely funded. And we've done this on average because each person, we've done this against the fact that each person in this room pays on average $150 less in taxes they did than when I took office. Now, Mr. Yalamachi picks out the fire dispatch, and that was something that I worked on, and I appreciate his help on that. It was not, him saying that it was, easy to do is kind of like saying, hey, you should have jumped out of the stock market when it was high. It's always easy to armchair quarterback. He didn't have to go in those rooms and talk to the 11 dispatchers that we laid off when we went to that program. But it took thorough research, and you don't do those things flippantly. But look at the budget, ladies and gentlemen. It's a budget that is recognized. Our budget director and budget team is one of only a couple in the country that have won the 2 most prestigious awards, I think 17 years in a row. It's a budget that you can be proud of, and when I stand for re-election, in large measure, it's because we have managed your tax dollars better than anyone else in this state.
Mr. Yalamanchi.
Thank you. You know, I've been part of this budget process. I've been an avid advocate for fiscal responsibility. I used to see expenditures, question them. There were times when I used to come with cost analysis to the budget meetings. Initially, we used to spend a lot of time on budgets, but over a period of time, we do the budgets in 2 nights. I will say this, though. The city has a great staff. The finance director, one of the best that the city can have. His projections are impressive. But it's the leadership, folks. It's the leadership.
Thank you. We've got to keep our rebuttals down to 30 seconds, and so I'm going to keep us going doing that way. Mr. Burnett.
30 seconds, yes. Mr. Yalamachi seems to be presenting a culture of his leadership, which would be a culture of no's. You know, no's to attorneys, no's to the courts. He voted no on the budget that just received all those awards, saved your dollars, saved so many dollars, and put us in such strong financial position. 6 out of 8 times he voted against the police and fire budget. He voted against OPC. He never saw a budget he liked, and that is a major concern.
So Mr. Stevens?
I have to.
I would like to say, as part of the city's employees, they're a strong point of the city also. If there's ways they see cost savings or some things that aren't done in an efficient manner, we should lean to their resources for cost savings to our taxpayers. And ones that do that, they should be benefited with some yearly bonuses and stuff to help bring that forward to the mayor. Say, hey, you know, this has cost us a lot more to do this. You know, hey, that's a great idea. We saved a ton of money on this, you know, doing this job. And pass along incentives to the employees as far as bonuses. Get more ideas, get better cost savings, and that, you know, in turn is better for the taxpayer. Thank you.
I really appreciate your great answers. We have a ton of questions, so we're going to keep it a little tighter on the time. Your question is for?
This is for all the candidates. What have been your most proud moments in the current position you hold, and why?
We'll start with Brian Barnett.
Two come to mind, and they're polar opposites. I was asked to represent our country last year on a delegation that represented and saw the significance of the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I wore an American flag and a City of Rochester Hills pendant on my chest, and I got to meet and talk with the leaders of history, Mikhail Gorbachev and Lech Walesa, and I couldn't have been more proud about representing our community there. The second that comes to mind that is equally as impressive to me is a time last year when my youngest son, Tristan, is a 4th grader, comes through on the 4th grade tours, and we'd worked this out the night before. You know, being a mayor's kid is a really challenging position, right? We have a very challenging lifestyle, very different lifestyle, and I said, Tristan, let's do something fun. So we dressed up. I dressed up in my normal suit and tie, and he dressed up. And when we did the tour, he came forward, and I said, I'd like to do this tour today with my son, Tristan. And as soon as we started, we both took off our shirts, and we had our matching Captain America undershirts on. And for the next half hour, we fielded questions from his class about what being a mayor and what being a mayor's son is like. The reason I am running for re-election, I've looked at other things, I've been asked to do other things. I love being able to impact my kid's life. I have 4 generations of my family that live here, and being able to impact them is why I do what I do. And that day with Tristan was probably the most special of my time as mayor.
Ravi Yalamachi.
Thank you. Serving on City Council was truly an honor for me. I was concerned about issues when I ran for City Council, and when the opportunity came, I relentlessly advocated for many issues. You know, the mayor said I voted no on the budget. You have to take a position and stance when things are not being done right, or when there's a possibilities that you can make an improvement. And to brush it off and saying all he does is no, No, it's just a politician speaking. There has to be a financial understanding, a budget understanding. 8 years was a great experience to me. I was the one that brought to the city council the idea of strategic plan. Being on OPC, I was the one that introduced strategic plan to OPC because we need to know where we're going into the future. What are we going to do? What is the vision for our future? And how exactly are we going to invest? That strategic plan, both at City Hall and at OPC, helped drive the future of both the organizations. That's the kind of thing I believe in. This is a great community. My wife and I really, and not only enjoy, but I think we've been very fortunate for our daughter who happened to go because of the Rochester schools to the International Academy. We benefited from that. This is a community where we not only raised our daughter, but we feel that it has been part of us and how best we can serve back to the community. I'm truly proud to be here and be part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Stevens?
I want to thank you all. And as far as my aspect of life is, I had a pretty good, wonderful career. Raised my children here, which are becoming very successful in life. That is my greatest achievement. My daughter going to Oakland University. She's doing really good in school. My oldest son being very successful in business. Actually, he probably makes more than all three of us up here. So I'm very happy for him. My success in life now is not for my own pockets, but to give back to the community. My trust in God, my belief in God and family values to help a neighbor or someone in need. Recently, a few years back, I had a young kid that lived down the street from me. His dad died from alcoholism. At the age 18, he woke up with his father dead, being a lone kid himself. I took him in, I fed him. I split firewood to heat his house. I want to give back to the community and serve the government here, serve the people. And I'm not here for the money, but having a successful city, wonderful parks, and clean air. That's what I stand for here. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes, just real quickly about the budget, Mr. Yalamachi's response. You know, I understand why he would want to recast his opinion and his votes, but the votes are there. When he says that, you know, he wanted to correct what was going wrong, you have Mr. Yalamachi saying the budget's wrong on one side, and you have Standard & Poor's, Fitch's rating agency, Moody's, and Plant Moran saying, you know what, your budget's pretty good, and you're doing an efficient job spending the residents' tax dollars. So they looked at him and said he's all wet.
Okay, so Mr. Yalamachi?
You know, getting Standard & Poor's rating doesn't make an excuse to improve on the budget. When you have a council, the mayor used to tell me, do you have enough votes? Anytime I presented him to something. It was not about getting the ideas together and creating a budget document or something. It was always about my way or the highway. There were many times I have shared ideas which were definitely not taken into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Yalamachi. And your question is for?
Each of the candidates. If elected office, what do you hope to accomplish your first 100 days, your first year, and during your term of office?
Let's start with Ravi Yalamachi.
Thank you. I think the first thing I would like to do is to provide leadership that is inclusive of the residents and community at large. To me, it always has to be about the residents. My personal value system is to incorporate trust and integrity into my own functioning, to always consider the impact of decisions on homeowner property values and engage citizens on relevant issues. I would like to see how we can improve the process time on plans, permits, and approvals so that the builders, contractors, and developers can move quickly and get the projects done. I would like to see an increase in funding for roads to $6 million. I want to invest in community policing. I would like to incorporate and recommend and right away implement the televising of the Planning Commission meetings. and definitely be transparent and not block information from residents. That's what I would like to do in the first 100 days and the first full year.
Thank you. Jim Stevens.
As far as my term in office, everyone says this, but basically, I look to keep our taxes low, keep the expenditures under management, look ways for saving money. Besides that, I want to keep our roads in good shape, doing good maintenance on the roads, keeping them patched or keeping them filled in, keep them from cracking. That will make the roads work a little bit longer. And basically keep crime out of our city. I basically plan to announce in all the newspapers and talk to our judges, any criminals and thugs that come to our city to rob, steal from our homeowners or local businesses, I plan to put them to work. If I have to buy property up in the UP and ship them up there, you come in this city, I will not tolerate any thugs stealing from our residents. I'm a man of action. Thank you.
Brian Barnett.
Yes, thank you. I'll answer this question by asking you and the audience to think about where we were 4 years ago. The same question was posed, Ms. Janius, what are your three biggest priorities? And my biggest priorities were solving police funding, road funding, and getting our city on financial footing. You think back 4 years ago, we were just recovering from the worst recession in 80 years. And in the last 4 years, ladies and gentlemen, we've delivered on each one of those. As we've talked about the budget in the last question, we're the envy of Southeast Michigan. We've solved police funding and road funding in large measure, and you can dive deep into those. We use creative, innovative ways to do both of those, all three of those actually. So what I had set as my priorities for the last term, promises made, promises kept. You said 100 days, 1 year in term. For the first 100 days, we really need to focus on our fire department. We've got 9 new firefighters who are cadets that are going through the process, and we're working to get them included into the system. This is a stark difference between my opponent, Mr. Yalamachi, and I. He has an atrocious record of supporting public safety, and was so atrocious that he was one of the few people that actively opposed the hiring of these firefighters and the support that the fire professionals had for the millage. That's what I want to focus on the first portion of my term. The second thing, I am passionate about Riverbend Park. I love that place. I've worked hard to raise almost $1.5 million, well, for that park, a little over $1 million privately to see that park develop, the first park development in 25 years. I love that place, and there's hardly a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about what we can do to advance that infrastructure and that park development there. And finally, for the term, I hope to be here 4 years from now talking about the continued excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the challenging questions you've asked, we are one of the 10 best places to live in the country and the safest city in Michigan. We're doing something right here, and I want to continue those great things. Thank you.
Who's your question for?
All three. And it could be yes or no. Would you be for or against an ordinance for LGBT protections in the Rochester Hills area for private businesses?
Let's start with Jim Stevens. Mr. Stevens.
What was the acronym on that?
LGBT.
Lesbian, gay, bi, transgender.
Listen here, what happens in the closet is none of my business, As far as I'm concerned, I love women, I'm all over that, so what you guys do wherever, hey, I don't want to hear about it, but next, thank you.
Mr. Yalamachi.
There's your headline.
Ravi Yalamachi.
Yes, thank you. Well, when I was on council, this issue did come up, and I really wanted to see a human rights ordinance that provided equal opportunity for employment and housing, no matter who you are. And unfortunately, that ordinance never came to the table and never got passed. I had no support about that. But I think having that opportunity for everybody, as a fellow human being, every human being I would like to see to be treated equal. And if we mean it by the Pledge of Allegiance, then we really need to follow through on it. So I'm very supportive of everybody having equal rights. Thank you.
Brian Barnett.
Yes, thank you for the question. When that issue did come before the council, there was a lot of a discussion about it on a regional standpoint. There were about, I think at the time, maybe 11 cities that had already had the ordinance in place, and many other cities were looking at it. When folks came to us to look at what we should do, we looked at the court's rulings. We tried to figure out how we'd actually apply something like that. And what the council did, I think, was pretty interesting. They passed an ordinance, or they passed a resolution, and it says right here, it says, the City of Rochester Hills reaffirms its support for the human rights and civil liberties of all people in Rochester Hills and the free exercise and enjoyment of any and all human rights, civil liberties, and privileges under the U.S. and Michigan Constitution, federal and state laws. And now, of course, you've seen much more action take place at the U.S. Supreme Court, so I think this issue has moved on from a local level and is now being handled at the federal level.
Mr. Yalamachi.
You know, the resolution got passed, but the ordinance never got introduced, never was given a chance. If we truly mean it, that we want to have equal rights for everybody, passing an ordinance should not be difficult. It's not about wiping somebody's tears. This is somebody's life, and we need to respect everybody's life, and everybody should be given equal opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
Well, I just wanted to say about the comments. Everybody kind of jokes about it, but I'm not a racist person. I'm just happen to be a Christian man, and I love women. So, but everybody has their own rights to what they believe in, and I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, and your question is for?
All three candidates. I had concerns a couple of years ago regarding a no-bid contract for our trash hauler. It was passed pretty quickly, and then shortly after, it was revealed that there was a large campaign donation to a Barnett PAC a couple weeks before the no-bid contract was signed. I generally don't like no-bid contracts. We have time to go to an RFP. So question to all three of you, well, Mr. Barnett, would we expect more no-bid contracts in a third term of yours? And Mr. Stevens and Yalamachi, would you sign no-bid contracts? Thanks.
So let's start with Mr. Barnett.
Well, thank you, Ms. Holliday. You have to move around the room. Carly, you've got the last 6 have been from my opponent's campaign team. But Ms. Holliday, thank you for the question. It actually, just to correct your statement, it wasn't a no-bid contract. The contract that we signed had a 5-year clause, and then a reopener, and then a 5-year option. So what we exercised was not a no bid at all. It was an exercise of whether or not we could renegotiate before we went out to the open market. So if you look back at the information on that, it was not a no bid contract at all. What you talk about there is actually a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, because if there's probably one thing that maybe we've been known for, what I've been known for over the last 6 years, has been the introduction of Recycle Bank and the single hauler solid waste system. Every one of you who lives in the city, when you think of those green bins, if tomorrow's trash day, I want you to look at the side of those. It says #1 in Michigan. And we took very bold leadership to bring that program forward. If you think about it, at the time, we did studies, and the average family, the Howlett family, for example, is paying something like $285 a year for trash. This was 6 years ago. And we had a lot of angry people said, the government shouldn't be involved in trash. I'm a small government guy. But we carved a niche, and we've been celebrated nationally for taking such amazing leadership on this. The Howlett, or the Barnett bill now is about $145 a year. We've saved our community about $18 million. That's money that's in your pockets in the audience here, not in the pockets of the garbage companies. We've increased recycling from, as I mentioned, about 18% to about 85%. We talked about the schools earlier. Those of you who have generously donated your points, we've had about $20,000 of revenue returned to the school district because of that program. And a lot of people said, Mayor, you'll never get reelected if you move this trash program forward. There's a lot of controversy about it, but we did it. And I think, you know, we polled our residents afterwards. Only 4% of the people in the community were not happy with the project. 4%. You could offer a free lunch and more than 4% of the people would complain about what you serve or what time it was served. So the program is very well received. It was certainly not a no-bid contract. Each year we've saved money, and actually when this ends in 5 years, your price will be cheaper than it was when it ended last year. Thank you.
Mr. Yalamachi.
Thank you. You know, the recycling program was one of the best things we did. There was a lot of collective effort in there. One of the things I've done personally was, I brought it to my colleague, Councilmember Greg Hooper, is doing a survey and getting input, and gave it to the mayor and to Councilmember Greg Hooper as to what things we should take into consideration when we try to put this thing together. 3 things I wanted to make sure in this recycling program is there was no tax, the billing was not going to be done by the city, and it would not increase any additional staff time and resources at the city. Those were the 3 things I focused on. When it all came together, there was really a team of individuals that worked on that, and I give them a lot of credit where I gave my input into the process. When it was adapted, it went really well. I think we can further improve that. In 2013, during the budget discussions, I came with a lot of ideas how we can improve it. What I did not know was there was a committee in place and there was already discussions happening. And then there was this no bid process or whatever it was going on. And due to family emergency, I could not be at the council meeting, and many residents, when they emailed me, I did not even know that was going on. Regardless of that, I think we put forward ideas, and you always can improve from where you are. And I think taking opportunity of a bid process, for me at least, is a good idea to pursue it. Even it may end up being the same company that's going to get it, but by doing that, we're making sure we're accountable, number one. Number two, we have an opportunity to try to improve whatever program we have, and that's what I would have recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Stevens?
As far as bidding processes with contractors, one's got to believe that whenever you have free competition, you get better prices. And having the size of our city, my thoughts early on during some of the council meetings I attended was why not divide the city north and south or east and west, have 2 contractors, but not covering the same roads. So then 4 years down the road, one guy comes up and says, hey, you know what, we got to start running prices up on you. And then I go to the other contractor and say, hey, you know, this guy's trying to slip one on us. So as long as you stay with competition and free markets, you're going to get the best prices most of the time. I've seen that in the auto sector where, you know, suppliers go out of business. Now the price of cars goes skyrocketing high. When there's only one man left in town, you know, you have no other choice. So for me, I like free markets. I have no outside influences to influence me. I don't need any money for campaigning. I don't need no bribes. I have money. I want to give money away. I want to help people in our community. And for everybody that's retiring, I want to keep your costs down. You know, why should I say, hey, I want to come out and double everybody's taxes? I'd be an idiot. But that's not me. I don't need the money. I want everybody in this community to stay happy, have money in their pockets. I like having money in my pocket. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yes, thank you. Just to bring this back from the recycling program, because I said, I think this is something that's exceptionally important, kind of a trademark of what we've been able to do. Mr. Yalamachi wasn't originally on board. He voted against it in 2006 and eventually came on board, and I appreciated his support for it once he came around on it. But it was a unanimous vote eventually, and as you know, it's been wonderfully successful. The challenge here is what I see constantly playing out is this trying to rewrite, you know, how you evaluate something. And leadership, ladies and gentlemen, you don't get the ability to armchair quarterback and say, well, we could have done this 6 months ago, or we should have seen that. You have to make decisions. So you rely on people. You rely on your experts. And voting against police and fire, voting against the community garden,
Mr. Barnett.
those things are troublesome.
Thank you. Mr. Yalamachi?
You know, the mayor is singing a song tonight. Here's what it is. The 2006, folks, there was no recycling in it. It was a city contract for one trash hauler, no recycling. Just look at it. It was the recycling thing that I have advocated for. It did not happen until later. And then there was a committee formed. The committee worked on it. I participated and gave my input into it. And when the recycling was brought into the picture, that's when I said I would be very supportive of it. You know, sometimes it may happen, lapse of memory. And also about this no vote on the public safety. You know, this is what politicians do. They hide behind police and fire. Just
you,
throw
Mr.
money at
Yalamanchi.
them, and then they will do it.
You wrote a letter to the
Thank you,
paper.
Mr. Yalamanchi.
You didn't hide behind
Yeah.
anything.
Gentlemen, we're done. Let's give our candidates a big round of applause first. Okay. And I have it's funny, my notes say 1 minute closing statement, but I think it's 30 seconds, right, Ann? Okay, so we do have one last thing, and that is a 30-second closing statement from each one of you gentlemen. And we'll be doing it in the reverse order that it was at the very beginning. So we're going to hear first the mayoral candidate from Brian Burnett. Mr. Burnett.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the league for hosting this event. Tonight, you have seen stark differences between myself and my two opponents. The difference summed up simply as rhetoric versus results. Tonight, I have laid out what tremendous accomplishments we have delivered as a team, and I am proud to live in this city. And I'm staking my re-election on the fact that you are proud to live in this city as well. You've trusted me with the awesome responsibility of leading this community, and tonight, based on our results, I'm asking for your continued support to write in my name and fill in the circle to keep these good things going. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, are we going to clap for all three? That's fine. Okay. Now we'll hear from Jim Stevens. Mr. Stevens.
As a taxpayer and homeowner of 28 years, I want to be your next mayor to serve you. I look to keep our taxes low. I want to address crime in our city. I want to work for you guys. I will have my phone number and email available and answer all calls 7 days a week. If you have an issue at your home, something's going wrong, call me up. I will respond to you and be there and act accordingly. I want to be your next mayor. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. And Mr. Ravi Yalamanchi. Mr. Yalamanchi.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the only reason I'm a candidate for mayor is to serve the community. I am not looking at the office of mayor as a permanent thing or to be a career politician. Status quo and complacency are inertia and not the solution. It's time for change in leadership with new ideas and new thinking in our city. Growth and productivity do not happen or begin or end with one person. No person is irreplaceable. It's the families that make us great. I ask for your vote on November 3rd, 2015. Let's make the change. The best is yet to come. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, really, thank you very much, candidates. In addition to the candidates that you've met here tonight, there will be 3 proposals on the November ballot. The proposals cover the following areas: Old Persons Commission millage, a Rochester Avon Recreation Authority, otherwise known as RARA, millage renewal, and a bonding proposal for the Rochester Community School District. I encourage you to go to the lwvoa.org website, that's the League of Women Voters Oakland area website, and read up on these 3 important proposals before you vote on them on November 3rd. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcasted several times for viewing on Comcast Channel 20, on WOW Channel 10, and on AT&T Channel 99. Running through Election Day, November 3rd. Please check the city website, rochesterhills.org, for days and times. You can also see this entire mayoral debate as well as the city council debate that was held on demand on the city's website, rochesterhills.org. A special thank you to the City of Rochester Hills for providing tonight's great venue, and for city employees Jason Dale and Eric Perry for their assistance, and for all the volunteers from the League of Women Voters. Thank you, audience, for your great questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to every single one of them, but they were all valid and wonderful. On behalf of Ann Edwards, the coordinators for tonight's forum, and the League of Women Voters, Oakland area, I'm Carla Brisbois-Gribbs. Thank you. Remember to vote November 3rd. Good night.